You've been taught that if you control everything, you can protect yourself from pain. That if you plan every detail, predict every problem, manage every person, and make sure nothing goes wrong, you will finally feel safe. But if control really creates peace, why does trying to control everything leave you more anxious? Why does your mind become restless when plans suddenly change? Why do you suffer when people do not behave the way you expected? Why does one uncertain moment make you feel like something must immediately be fixed? The truth is, the more you try to control life, the more life begins to control your peace. Buddhist teachings have warned about this for centuries. The Buddha taught that suffering grows from attachment, from clinging to how things should be, from demanding certainty in a world that is always changing. The tighter you hold, the more painful every change becomes. Today, as you listen to these teachings, something may begin to shift. Your mind may stop trying to solve every future problem before it happens. The pressure to control every outcome may slowly loosen. You may begin to see that peace does not come from forcing life to obey you. It comes from learning how to accept what you cannot hold, what you cannot predict, and what you cannot change. This is not about becoming weak or careless. It is about ending the exhausting fight with life and discovering why trying to control everything creates more suffering. Are you ready? Let's begin. And this is where the struggle really begins, because behind the desire to control everything, there is often something much deeper than discipline, responsibility, or careful planning. There is fear, quiet fear. Fear of being hurt, disappointed, rejected, embarrassed, abandoned, betrayed, or caught unprepared. The need for control can look strong from the outside, but inside it is often a frightened mind, trying desperately to make sure nothing painful ever happens again. You may not even notice this fear at first. You may simply tell yourself that you like things done properly. You prefer to know what is happening. You want people to keep their promises. You want plans to go the way they were arranged. You want answers when something feels uncertain. You want to know where a relationship is going, whether your job is safe, whether your money will be enough, whether someone still cares about you, whether tomorrow will bring good news or bad news. None of these desires are strange. They are deeply human. The suffering begins when your peace depends on getting certainty from a life that cannot promise certainty. Buddhist teachings ask us to look beneath our behavior instead of judging only what appears on the surface. If you are constantly checking, planning, correcting, predicting, worrying, or trying to manage the behavior of others, the question is not simply, "Why am I like this?" A more useful question is, "What am I afraid will happen if I stop?" That question can reveal a lot. Maybe you are afraid that if you do not plan every detail, something will go terribly wrong. Maybe you are afraid that if you do not keep checking on someone, they will forget you or choose somebody else. Maybe you are afraid that if you do not explain yourself perfectly, people will misunderstand you. Maybe you are afraid that if you do not stay alert, somebody will take advantage of you. Maybe you are afraid that if you relax, life will punish you for becoming comfortable. So the mind begins to believe that tension is protection. It starts to treat worry as responsibility. It treats overthinking as wisdom. It treats control as love. It treats constant preparation as safety. And because these habits sometimes appear useful, they can remain hidden for years. You may tell yourself, "I am only being careful." But there is a difference between being careful and being unable to rest. You may tell yourself, "I just want to be prepared." But there is a difference between preparation and mentally living through disasters that have not happened. You may tell yourself, "I only want what is best for them." But there is a difference between caring for someone and needing them to live according to your expectations. This is one reason the fear behind control can be difficult to recognize. It often disguises itself as something respectable. A controlling parent may call it protection. A controlling partner may call it love. A controlling worker may call it perfectionism. A controlling mind may call it planning. But beneath these names there can be the same message. I do not trust what will happen if I let go. Buddhism does not tell you to become passive or foolish. It does not teach that you should stop planning, stop caring, or stop protecting yourself. It teaches something more subtle. Do what you can, but do not build your peace on the belief that you can control what comes next. There is a great difference between wise action and desperate control. Wise action says, I will prepare carefully, then I will meet whatever happens. Fearful control says, I must make sure nothing happens that I cannot handle. That second belief creates endless suffering because life will never give you that guarantee. You can eat carefully and still become sick. You can love someone deeply and still lose them. You can raise a child with patience and still watch them make choices you would never make. You can work hard and still lose an opportunity. You can plan a journey and still meet a storm. You can do everything correctly and still receive an outcome you did not want. This is not because life is cruel. It is because life is uncertain, and uncertainty is exactly what the controlling mind finds difficult to accept. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent. Everything changes. Bodies change. Relationships change. Feelings change. Plans change. Opinions change. Circumstances change. People who once needed you may become independent. People who once understood you may misunderstand you. Things that once made you happy may stop satisfying you. Problems you feared may disappear, while problems you never expected may suddenly arrive. If you demand permanence from an impermanent world, your mind will constantly feel threatened. Think about how much energy it takes to resist this truth. You wake up, and immediately the mind begins working. What needs to be fixed? Who has not replied? What could go wrong? What did that person mean? What if this happens? What if that does not happen? What should I say? What should I avoid? How can I make sure everything stays under control? Even when your body is sitting still, the mind is running. This is why some people feel exhausted without understanding why. They may not be doing heavy physical work, but mentally they are trying to hold the entire world together. They are managing conversations that have not happened, solving problems that may never arrive, preparing explanations nobody has requested, replaying old situations, trying to discover what they should have said, predicting other people's reactions, searching for hidden meanings, trying to arrange tomorrow before today is even finished. The mind believes this activity is keeping danger away, but often it is simply keeping fear alive. There is an old human instinct behind this. When we feel threatened, we naturally want to gain control. If you hear a strange sound at night, you want to know what caused it. If someone you love becomes distant, you want an explanation. If your health changes suddenly, you want answers. Certainty reduces fear because the unknown can feel dangerous. This instinct helped human beings survive real dangers. But the problem begins when the mind uses the same survival response for emotional uncertainty. A late message becomes a threat. A changed tone becomes a threat. A delayed result becomes a threat. A disagreement becomes a threat. A mistake becomes a threat. A future that cannot be predicted becomes a threat. The body can then react as though something terrible is already happening, even when the danger exists only inside thought. This is where mindfulness becomes powerful. Instead of immediately trying to control the situation, you begin to notice what is happening inside you. You feel the tightness in your chest. You notice the urge to check your phone again. You notice the need to ask the same question for reassurance. You notice the mind racing toward the worst possible outcome. You notice irritation growing because somebody is not doing what you want. And instead of obeying the urge immediately, you become curious. What am I afraid of right now? That question creates space. Perhaps the answer is, I am afraid they are losing interest in me. Or, I am afraid I will fail. Or, I am afraid people will judge me. Or, I am afraid I will not be able to cope. Often the true fear is not the event itself. It is the belief that you will not be able to survive the feelings the event might create. That is important. The controlling mind does not only fear what may happen, it fears its own future pain. You may not simply be afraid of rejection. You may be afraid of how rejection would make you feel. You may not simply be afraid of losing money. You may be afraid of the shame, uncertainty, or dependence that loss might bring. You may not simply be afraid of someone leaving. You may be afraid of loneliness. This means the real work is not learning how to control every possible event. The real work is learning that you can meet difficult emotions without being destroyed by them. That changes everything. If you know that disappointment can hurt you but not end you, you no longer need to manipulate every outcome. If you know that uncertainty can feel uncomfortable but can be endured, you no longer need immediate answers. If you know that somebody may misunderstand you and you can still remain at peace with yourself, you no longer need to explain every detail. If you know that people can leave and you can still continue living with dignity, you no longer need to grip relationships with fear. This is inner strength in Buddhist practice. It is not the strength of controlling the world. It is the strength of no longer demanding that the world behave a certain way before you allow yourself to be peaceful. That kind of strength is quiet. There is also another hidden fear behind control, the fear of helplessness. Many people had moments in life when they truly had no control. Perhaps they grew up in a home where moods changed suddenly. Maybe someone they trusted became unreliable. Perhaps they experienced loss without warning. Maybe they were betrayed by someone they believed would always be loyal. Perhaps illness appeared unexpectedly. Maybe money disappeared. Maybe a relationship ended without the explanation they wanted. When something painful happens unexpectedly, the mind may make a silent promise. Never again. Never again will I be caught off guard. Never again will I trust too easily. Never again will I depend on someone. Never again will I let things become uncertain. And so control becomes a shield. At first, this shield can feel useful. It gives the mind something to do. Instead of feeling vulnerable, you plan. Instead of feeling grief, you analyze. Instead of feeling fear, you organize. Instead of admitting that you cannot control another person, you watch them more closely. But a shield carried too long becomes heavy. Eventually, the method you created to protect yourself begins to imprison you. You cannot relax because relaxing feels unsafe. You cannot trust because trust requires uncertainty. You cannot enjoy good moments because you are already preparing for how they might end. You cannot love freely because part of you is always guarding against loss. You cannot simply sit in peace because the mind believes peace means you are not paying enough attention. That is suffering. And the painful part is that you may not realize you are creating it in the name of protection. There is a Buddhist story-like truth found throughout the teachings. What we cling to eventually becomes a source of fear because anything we hold can change. If you cling tightly to reputation, you fear criticism. If you cling tightly to money, you fear loss. If you cling tightly to a relationship, you fear abandonment. If you cling tightly to being right, you fear being corrected. If you cling tightly to certainty, you fear every unanswered question. The problem is not that these things are bad. The problem is believing your peace depends on keeping them exactly as they are. Attachment says, this must stay. Reality says, everything changes. And suffering appears between those two statements. Control is often an attempt to force the first statement onto the second. But life keeps moving. One of the hardest truths to accept is that people are separate beings. They have their own minds, desires, fears, habits, wounds, and choices. You can advise them. You can love them. You can set boundaries. You can leave harmful situations. You can communicate clearly. But you cannot enter another person's mind and arrange their thoughts according to your wishes. Yet many people spend years trying. They try to control how their children live. They try to control whether a partner changes. They try to control whether friends understand them. They try to control what relatives say about them. They try to control whether everybody approves of their decisions. And every time another person refuses to follow the expected path, suffering rises. This is why letting go of control is not simply a mental exercise. It is learning to recognize where your responsibility ends. Your words are your responsibility. Your intentions are your responsibility. Your actions are your responsibility. Your boundaries are your responsibility. Another person's reaction is not fully yours. This can feel frightening at first because the mind wants guarantees. If I speak kindly, they should understand me. If I love them, they should love me back. If I help them, they should appreciate me. If I apologize, they should forgive me. But life does not work through these simple exchanges. You can do good and still be misunderstood. You can be honest and still be doubted. You can apologize sincerely and still not be forgiven. You can love someone and still discover that the relationship cannot continue. Accepting this does not make you cold. It makes your love less controlling. You begin to give without secretly demanding a certain emotional payment. Another fear hiding behind control is the fear of making mistakes. Perfectionism often grows from this. A person may spend far too long making small decisions because they are afraid of choosing incorrectly. They may rewrite messages again and again. They may delay starting because they want the perfect plan. They may avoid opportunities unless success feels guaranteed. From the outside, this looks like high standards. Inside, there may be fear. What if I fail? What if I look foolish? What if I regret this? What if people discover I am not as capable as they think? Control promises protection from mistakes. But that promise is impossible. No human being moves through life without error. Even wise people misjudge situations. Even experienced people make poor choices. Even careful people overlook things. Buddhist practice does not ask you to become perfect before you find peace. It teaches awareness, learning, and compassion. A mistake can become a teacher if you stop turning it into an attack on your identity. You made a poor decision. That does not mean you are a failure. You trusted the wrong person. That does not mean you should never trust again. You missed an opportunity. That does not mean life has finished offering you possibilities. When mistakes stop feeling like proof that something is wrong with you, the need to control every decision begins to weaken. You become willing to move. You become willing to learn. You become willing to live. And living always involves risk. You cannot remove every risk from love, work, friendship, family, health, or change. You can only become wiser in the way you respond. This brings us to another important Buddhist lesson. Fear often lives in the future. Right now, you may be sitting somewhere completely safe, but your mind can travel 6 months ahead and create suffering. What if the money runs out? What if my health becomes worse? What if my children stop visiting? What if I lose my job? What if I never find the right person? What if this relationship ends? The body can begin reacting to events that have not happened. This is why returning to the present moment matters. The present does not promise that nothing difficult will happen. It simply reminds you that the difficulty you are imagining is not happening right now. Right now, breathe. Right now, notice where you are. Right now, ask what actually requires your attention. There is wisdom in preparing for real possibilities. There is suffering in mentally experiencing every possible tragedy before life has chosen one. Most of the future scenarios your mind creates will never happen exactly as imagined. And even when something difficult does happen, you will meet it as the person you are at that moment, with resources, information, people, and strength you may not have today. You do not need to solve tomorrow using only today's understanding. Fear tells you that you must. This is another reason control becomes exhausting. You are trying to answer questions whose answers do not exist yet. You cannot know exactly how another person will feel next year. You cannot know every turn your career will take. You cannot know how long a relationship will last. You cannot know every challenge your body will face. There are questions that only time can answer. Wisdom includes knowing when to stop demanding an answer from the present that belongs to the future. The Buddha's path repeatedly brings attention back to direct experience. What is happening now? What feeling is present? What thought is arising? What attachment is creating tension? What can be acted upon wisely? What must be allowed to unfold? These questions are far more useful than endless attempts to predict everything. And perhaps the deepest fear behind control is the fear of surrender. People sometimes misunderstand surrender. They think it means defeat. But Buddhist surrender is not saying nothing matters. It is saying, I will stop fighting what has already become true. If someone has left, surrender means accepting that they have left instead of mentally trying to rewrite the past. If something has ended, surrender means grieving the ending instead of demanding that life return to yesterday. If you do not have an answer, surrender means admitting you do not know instead of creating 10 painful theories. If another person chooses differently, surrender means allowing them to carry responsibility for their choice. There is enormous peace in that. You stop arguing with reality. You stop saying, this should not be happening, long after. It has already happened. You stop trying to control what no longer belongs to you, and the energy that was trapped in resistance begins returning. You can use it to heal. You can use it to learn. You can use it to care for yourself. You can use it to take the next wise step. That is the strange truth about control. The more desperately you try to control everything, the weaker you may feel because your peace is constantly dependent on the outside world. But when you accept that some things cannot be controlled, something powerful happens. You begin discovering what can be controlled. You can choose whether you feed an angry thought for hours. You can choose whether you keep chasing someone who has made their decision clear. You can choose whether you speak from fear or patience. You can choose whether you spend tonight worrying about tomorrow. You can choose whether you keep carrying resentment. You can choose whether you learn from pain or build your entire identity around it. You cannot command life, but you can train your relationship with life. That is where freedom begins. The next time you feel the urgent need to control something, do not immediately fight yourself. Do not become angry because fear has appeared. Simply notice it. Pause. Ask yourself, what am I afraid would happen if I stopped trying to control this? Then listen carefully. The answer may surprise you. Perhaps beneath your anger is fear of being ignored. Beneath your planning is fear of failure. Beneath your jealousy is fear of being replaced. Beneath your perfectionism is fear of judgment. Beneath your need for answers is fear of uncertainty. Once you see the fear clearly, you no longer need to hide it behind control. You can meet it directly. You can breathe with it. You can remind yourself, I do not know what will happen, but I can meet what comes. That sentence does not promise certainty, it offers something better: trust in your ability to respond. And this is where the Buddhist path begins to soften the grip. Not by convincing you that nothing painful will ever happen, but by helping you understand that pain does not need to become endless suffering. Not every disappointment must become bitterness. Not every uncertainty must become anxiety. Not every loss must become a lifelong refusal to love again. Not every mistake must become shame. You cannot control whether life changes, but you can gradually stop treating change as an enemy. And when you do, the hidden fear beneath control begins losing its power. You may notice that your shoulders feel lighter. You may stop checking things so often. You may become more patient with people. You may allow plans to change without feeling personally attacked by life. You may become comfortable saying, "I don't know yet." That small sentence can be deeply freeing. I don't know yet. The controlling mind hates those words. The peaceful mind can live beside them, because peace is not knowing exactly what comes next. Peace is no longer believing that you must know before you can breathe. And once you begin seeing the fear hidden beneath your need to control, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. Control does not only grow from fear, it also gives the mind a temporary feeling of safety. For a moment, planning, checking, correcting, and predicting can make you feel as though everything is secure. But that feeling rarely lasts. Soon, another uncertainty appears. Another question needs answering. Another outcome needs managing. And the mind begins tightening again. That is where the next part of this journey takes us, because what feels like safety can quietly become anxiety, and the very thing you use to calm your fear can become the reason your mind never truly rests. That is the trap. The mind discovers that control can reduce fear for a moment, so it starts reaching for control again and again. You check one more time, ask one more question, make one more plan, correct one more detail, and for a few seconds you feel calmer. But the calm never stays. Soon there is another uncertainty, another possibility, another thing that might go wrong. What first looked like protection slowly becomes a habit of tension, and before long, the mind is no longer using control to escape anxiety. Control itself is creating the anxiety. This is why control can be so difficult to recognize as a problem. It often feels responsible, it feels organized, it feels careful, it can even feel intelligent. When you know what is happening, you feel safer. When everything follows the plan, your body relaxes. When people respond the way you expected, your mind settles. So naturally, you begin believing that peace comes from keeping everything under control. But that kind of peace is very fragile because it depends on life. Behaving exactly the way you want. The moment something changes, the peace disappears. A person does not reply when expected. A plan is delayed. Someone changes their mind. A bill arrives that you did not prepare for. Your child makes a decision you disagree with. A doctor says more tests are needed. Someone you trusted acts differently. Suddenly, the mind that felt calm begins searching for control again. This creates a hidden condition inside you. I can relax only when I know what is going to happen. That condition is almost impossible to satisfy because life constantly produces the unknown. So instead of learning how to feel safe while some things remain uncertain, you begin trying to remove uncertainty itself. That is where anxiety quietly grows. Anxiety does not always arrive as panic. Sometimes it appears as constant checking. Sometimes it sounds like, "I just need to be sure." Sometimes it looks like asking the same question in different ways because the first answer did not calm you enough. Sometimes it becomes a need to know where everyone is, what they are thinking, and what they are going to do next. The mind keeps saying, "Once I know, I will relax." But after it knows one thing, it immediately finds another thing it does not know. This is how control creates an endless search for certainty. You may notice it in very ordinary situations. You send someone a message and they do not reply quickly. At first, there is simply silence. Nothing else has happened. But the mind dislikes the empty space, so it begins filling it. Why have they not answered? Did I say something wrong? Are they upset with me? Are they ignoring me? Should I send another message? Should I call? Maybe I should check whether they are online. The anxiety grows because the mind is trying to force certainty out of something that has not yet revealed its answer. Eventually, the person may simply reply, "Sorry, I was busy." For a moment, relief arrives. And this is important. That relief teaches the brain something. It teaches the brain, checking and worrying were useful because now I feel better. But the worrying did not create the reply. It only made the waiting more painful. The mind does not always understand this difference. So the next time uncertainty appears, it repeats the same behavior. This is how anxiety can become connected to reassurance. The more reassurance you need, the less comfortable you become without it. Someone tells you everything is fine, but 10 minutes later you want to hear it again. You check the door once, then wonder whether you really locked it. You review your work carefully, then return to it because maybe you missed something. You ask someone whether they are angry, they say no, but their voice sounded different, so you ask again later. The problem is not that reassurance is always bad. The problem is when your mind stops trusting itself unless reassurance keeps arriving. Then calm becomes something other people must give you. And when they cannot give it, anxiety rises. Buddhist teachings encourage a different kind of stability. Instead of asking, "How do I make everything certain?" the practice becomes, "How do I remain present while certainty is unavailable?" This is a completely different skill. One tries to control the world, the other trains the mind. The first is endless because the world keeps changing. The second becomes stronger with practice because every uncertain moment becomes an opportunity to develop patience. This is where mindfulness becomes more than simply being calm. Mindfulness teaches you to observe the urge to control before you automatically follow it. You notice the thought, "I need to check." You notice the pressure in your body. You notice the desire for an answer. And instead of instantly obeying the urge, you remain with the discomfort for a little longer. At first, this may feel difficult. The mind may say, "Do something." But if there is no real danger, you can wait. You discover something surprising. The discomfort rises, but it also falls. You do not always have to solve it. You do not always have to remove it. Sometimes you simply allow it to pass. This is one of the most useful lessons for an anxious mind. Not every uncomfortable feeling requires action. A feeling of uncertainty is not the same thing as an emergency. A thought about danger is not proof of danger. A strong urge to check does not mean checking is necessary. The controlling mind often confuses emotional intensity with truth. Because something feels urgent, it assumes something urgent must be happening. But feelings can be powerful without being accurate. You can feel abandoned while someone is simply busy. You can feel unsafe while sitting in a safe room. You can feel certain that something will go wrong and nothing goes wrong. You can feel that you need an answer immediately when waiting would cause no harm. This is why Buddhist awareness asks you to see thoughts as thoughts, not commands. A thought appears. What if everything goes wrong? You do not need to argue with it. You do not need to believe it. You do not need to build a plan around it. You can simply notice, fear is speaking. That small change can reduce the power of anxiety, because anxiety grows when every fearful thought becomes a problem to solve. If your mind creates 10 possible disasters in 1 hour and you try to solve all 10, you will be exhausted. But if you learn to recognize that a thought can appear without demanding a response, the mind slowly becomes less reactive. Control also creates anxiety by making you feel responsible for things that were never fully your responsibility. You may feel responsible for keeping everyone happy. You may feel responsible for preventing arguments. You may feel responsible for another person's mood. You may feel responsible for making sure nobody is disappointed in you. You may feel responsible for predicting problems before they happen. At first, this may make you feel useful, but underneath, it creates enormous pressure. Because if you believe you are responsible for everything, then every problem starts feeling like your failure. Someone is unhappy, and you wonder what you did wrong. Two family members argue, and you feel you must fix it. A child makes a bad decision, and you blame yourself. A friend becomes distant, and you start searching for the mistake you must have made. This is too much weight for one mind. Buddhism teaches compassion, but compassion does not mean carrying every person's life on your back. There is a difference between caring and controlling. You can support someone without becoming responsible for their choices. You can love someone without managing their emotions. You can offer advice without demanding that it be followed. You can help without believing that you must prevent every painful lesson another person may need to learn. When you forget these boundaries, anxiety becomes almost unavoidable. Because the world contains too many people, too many choices, and too many outcomes for you to manage. The mind may still try. It may say, if I say the right thing, everyone will get along. If I work hard enough, nobody will criticize me. If I watch closely enough, nothing bad will happen. But these promises create impossible standards, and impossible standards create constant tension. This is one reason perfectionism often walks beside control. Perfectionism tells you that safety exists somewhere beyond the perfect decision, the perfect plan, the perfect performance. If everything is perfect, maybe nothing can go wrong. So you spend more time preparing. You delay action. You check again. You hesitate. You compare. You become afraid of ordinary mistakes. Even simple decisions can start feeling heavy because each one seems to carry too much meaning. What if I choose the wrong thing? What if I regret this? What if people think I am foolish? A healthy mind understands that decisions involve uncertainty. A controlling mind tries to remove uncertainty before deciding, and because certainty rarely arrives, decisions become more stressful than they need to be. Buddhist wisdom offers a more balanced way. Make the best decision you can with the understanding you have now. Then release the demand to know the future. This does not mean acting carelessly. It means accepting that no amount of thinking can turn a human being into someone who can see every consequence. There will always be information you do not have. There will always be factors you cannot predict. There will always be other people making choices of their own. Wisdom is not perfect prediction. Wisdom is clear action without demanding perfect certainty. The controlling mind also creates anxiety by constantly watching for signs that control is being lost. When everything is calm, instead of enjoying calm, you may scan for problems. Things have been going well. Something must be coming. This relationship feels too good. What if it ends? My health has been fine. What if something is wrong and I do not know yet? This is a painful way to live because even peace becomes suspicious. The mind becomes unable to receive good moments fully. It stands at the edge of happiness waiting for loss. It thinks this will make future pain easier. It does not. It simply brings future pain into the present before anything has happened. This is where anxiety steals life quietly. It rarely steals the entire day at once. It steals moments. You are having dinner, but your mind is worrying about next month. You are speaking with someone you love, but part of your attention is wondering whether the relationship will last. You are resting, but you feel guilty because you could be preparing for something. You are enjoying a good day, but you are waiting for bad news. The body is in one place, the mind is somewhere else, and life is happening without your full presence. This is why Buddhist teachings place so much importance on returning to what is here. Not because the future does not matter, because the future does not exist yet in the form your mind is trying to control. You can prepare for tomorrow while living today. You can save money without worrying every hour. You can care for your health without treating every sensation as danger. You can love people without rehearsing their loss. You can create plans without turning those plans into emotional contracts with life. A plan is useful when it guides you. A plan becomes suffering when you believe reality has failed because reality did not follow it. The same is true of routines. Routine can provide stability, but if your peace disappears whenever the routine changes, stability has turned into dependence. Suppose you prefer waking at a certain time, eating at a certain time, completing tasks in a certain order. There is nothing wrong with this. The problem begins when a small interruption creates anger or panic because your mind interprets change as loss of control. Then the routine is no longer serving you. You are serving the routine. Buddhist flexibility does not mean chaos. It means you can have structure without becoming trapped by structure. You can prefer one outcome without believing you cannot handle another. This kind of flexibility reduces anxiety because the mind stops seeing every unexpected change as a threat. Control also creates anxiety in relationships because it turns love into constant monitoring. When you care deeply, uncertainty can feel dangerous. You want to know where you stand. You want signs of loyalty. You want consistent affection. Again, these needs are human. But if you begin trying to control love, love starts losing its natural freedom. You may watch every change in tone. You may measure how long someone takes to reply. You may compare how they treat you today with how they treated you last week. You may search for signs that affection is decreasing. This constant monitoring creates exactly what you fear. You become less relaxed, more suspicious, more demanding, more easily hurt. The other person may begin feeling watched rather than loved. Then tension enters the relationship, and the controlling mind says, "See, something is wrong." Without realizing it, fear may have helped create the very distance it was trying to prevent. Buddhist teachings remind us that love without attachment has a different quality. It still cares deeply. But it does not say, "You must behave exactly this way for me to feel safe." It says, "I value you, but I understand that you are changing just as I am changing." This does not mean accepting betrayal or disrespect. You can have strong boundaries. You can leave situations that harm you. But boundaries are different from control. A boundary says, "This is what I will do if something happens." Control says, "I must make sure you never do it." One focuses on your response. The other tries to command another person's behavior. That difference can remove enormous anxiety because you stop spending your energy on preventing every possible action and begin trusting yourself to respond wisely if something happens. This is one of the deepest changes a person can make. Instead of saying, "Nothing bad can happen," you begin saying, "If something difficult happens, I will face it." The first statement depends on control. The second depends on resilience. Control is fragile. Resilience is flexible. A rigid branch may look strong until the wind arrives. A flexible branch bends and survives. The mind can learn the same strength. There is also a physical side to this anxiety. When the mind constantly tries to control uncertain situations, the body can remain in a state of readiness. Muscles stay tense. Breathing becomes shallow. Sleep becomes difficult. You may wake during the night and immediately begin thinking. The mind starts reviewing problems before the body has even fully awakened. This is why simply telling yourself, "Stop worrying," rarely works. The body has learned the habit too. Buddhist practices involving breathing can help because breath gives the mind something real to return to. You do not need a complicated method. Notice the breath entering. Notice the breath leaving. Feel the body sitting or lying down. Let the shoulders loosen. Then notice what thought is asking for control. You are not trying to force the thought away. You are teaching your nervous system that you can remain still even while uncertainty exists. This is powerful because anxiety usually demands movement. Check, call, search, ask, plan, fix. Breathing interrupts the command. For a moment, you are not solving life. You are simply alive, and perhaps nothing needs to be solved in that moment. The mind may resist this. It may say, "But what if I forget something important?" If something truly requires action, you can act after the pause. The purpose is not to become passive. The purpose is to separate real action from anxious reaction. Real action usually feels clearer. There is a problem. You understand what can be done. You do it. Anxious reaction feels different. It circles. It repeats. It rarely reaches a stopping point. It searches for perfect reassurance. Learning to recognize this difference can save enormous mental energy. Ask yourself, is there a useful action available right now? If yes, take it. If no, notice whether your mind is trying to manufacture one simply because waiting feels uncomfortable. Sometimes the wisest action is waiting, waiting for more information, waiting for emotions to settle, waiting for someone to respond, waiting for the situation to reveal itself. The controlling mind hates waiting because waiting exposes its lack of power. But patience is not weakness. Patience is the ability to remain steady without forcing an early answer. Many poor decisions happen because people cannot tolerate uncertainty. They send the angry message. They end the relationship too quickly. They make a financial choice out of panic. They demand an answer from someone who has not had time to think. Then they create new problems while trying to escape temporary discomfort. Patience prevents this. Buddhist practice trains you to stay with the gap between question and answer, between desire and action, between emotion and response. Inside that gap, wisdom can appear. Anxiety wants speed. Awareness gives you space. Control also creates anxiety because it keeps moving the line of what counts as safe enough. At first, you only need a basic plan. Then you want a backup plan. Then you need another backup plan. Then you want to prepare for the backup plan failing. This is why complete safety never arrives. The mind keeps changing the requirement. It says, just one more thing. And after that thing, there is another. This is similar to trying to fill a container with a hole in the bottom. You keep pouring certainty into it, but certainty leaks away. The answer is not to pour faster. The answer is to understand that the container itself cannot hold what you are demanding. Life cannot provide permanent certainty. Once you accept that, something changes. You stop asking life for a promise it cannot give. You begin looking for stability in another place, not in outcomes, not in other people's behavior, not in perfect plans, but in awareness, in values, in the ability to return to the present, in the knowledge that difficult feelings rise and fall, in the understanding that you have survived uncertainty before. This creates a deeper kind of safety. It is not the safety of knowing everything. It is the safety of knowing you do not need to know everything. That is a very different life. You can go to sleep without solving every problem. You can let a message remain unanswered. You can allow someone to misunderstand you for a while. You can make a decision without checking it 20 times. You can enjoy a good moment without asking how long it will last. You can allow tomorrow to become tomorrow. This is not carelessness, it is trust. Not blind trust in life always going your way. Trust in your ability to meet life when it does not. And this is where anxiety begins losing its grip, because the mind no longer needs complete control before it permits itself to feel calm. You may still prepare, you may still prefer certain outcomes, you may still feel nervous sometimes, but you stop adding a second layer of suffering by telling yourself that uncertainty should not exist. You begin saying, "This is uncertain, and I can still breathe. This may change, and I can still be present. I do not know what will happen, and I do not need to know yet." Those sentences teach the mind a new relationship with safety. Safety no longer means everything is controlled. Safety becomes the ability to stay grounded while life remains partly unknown. And when you begin living this way, you may notice something else. Much of your anxiety was never coming from what was happening. It was coming from the demand that what was happening must match what you expected. That realization leads us naturally into the next lesson, because control becomes even more painful when it moves. From situations into people. It is one thing to want a plan to go your way. It is another to expect another human being to think, speak, choose, and behave according to the picture you have created in your mind. And when they do not, suffering can become much deeper. And this is where control becomes deeply personal, because it is much easier to accept that a plan may change than to accept that a person may not become who you hoped they would be. You can prepare for bad weather, you can change a schedule, you can make another financial plan, but when someone you love keeps making choices you do not understand, when they refuse your advice, when they speak in ways you never expected, or when they fail to become the person you believed they should be, the pain can feel much heavier. That pain becomes even stronger when your mind quietly says they should be different. A large amount of human suffering comes from this one hidden expectation. We do not only see people as they are, we often see them through the picture we have created of who they are supposed to be. A parent thinks, "My child should listen to me." A husband thinks, "My wife should understand me." A wife thinks, "My husband should know what I need without me explaining it." A friend thinks, "If they really cared, they would behave differently." A brother thinks, "My family should support me." A worker thinks, "My boss should recognize how hard I work." The word "should" may sound small, but it carries enormous emotional weight. The moment another person fails to match that expectation, disappointment appears. Then disappointment often becomes anger. Anger becomes resentment. Resentment becomes distance. And eventually, you may find yourself suffering not only because of what the person did, but because you are fighting the fact that they are not behaving according to your inner script. Buddhist teachings encourage us to look closely at this. Before another person speaks, you may already have an idea of what they should say. Before they make a decision, you may already know what you believe they should choose. Before they respond to your kindness, you may already expect gratitude. This means you are not simply meeting another human being, you are meeting your expectation of them. That expectation can become invisible because it feels reasonable. You may think, anyone would expect this. But people are not copies of you. They did not grow up with your mind. They do not carry your memories. They do not feel every situation the way you do. They have their own fears, habits, values, desires, weaknesses, and ways of understanding life. The suffering begins when you forget this and start believing that because your way makes sense to you, it should make sense to them. This happens often in families. A parent spends years caring for a child. The parent sacrifices money, time, sleep, and comfort. Then the child becomes an adult and chooses a life the parent does not understand. Perhaps the child moves far away. Perhaps they choose a career the parent dislikes. Perhaps they marry someone the family would not have chosen. Perhaps they raise their own children differently. The parent may feel deeply hurt. After everything I did, why won't they listen to me? There is real emotion inside that question, but beneath the emotion there may also be ownership. I gave so much, therefore you should live in a way that makes me comfortable. Buddhist wisdom asks us to love without turning love into a debt. You can guide a child. You can protect them while they are young. You can teach them your values. But eventually, their life becomes their life. That can be difficult to accept because love naturally creates concern. You may see a mistake coming and want to stop it. Sometimes you should speak. Sometimes you should warn. Sometimes you should offer help. But after you have spoken clearly, there may come a moment when you have to allow another person to choose. This does not mean you approve. It means you recognize reality. They have a mind you cannot control. If you keep fighting that truth, you can spend years emotionally exhausted. You may repeat advice they have already heard. You may argue at every family gathering. You may interpret disagreement as disrespect. You may slowly damage the relationship while telling yourself you are trying to save the person. At some point, wisdom asks a painful question. Do I want this person to become wiser, or do I simply want them to obey me? Those are not always the same thing. Sometimes obedience looks like peace because there is no argument. But true harmony does not come from forcing everyone into the same shape. It comes from learning how to remain connected even when differences exist. This is why expectations can become dangerous in close relationships. The closer someone is to you, the more expectations you may place on them. A stranger can forget your birthday, and you probably will not care. A close friend forgets, and suddenly it hurts. Why? Because closeness creates meaning. You expected them to remember because you believe remembering is a sign of care. That is understandable. But the mind can move too quickly from, I wish they had remembered, to, if they cared about me, they would have remembered. Now an event has become a judgment about the person's heart. This is how expectations often create stories. Someone is quiet, so you decide they are angry. Someone does not call, so you decide they do not care. Someone disagrees with you, so you decide they do not respect you. Someone needs space, so you decide they are abandoning you. The event may be real. The meaning you add may not be. Buddhist mindfulness teaches you to separate what happened from the story you immediately build around it. What happened? They did not call. What did your mind add? They do not care about me. Those are different statements. The first may be a fact. The second is an interpretation. This distinction can prevent enormous suffering, because many arguments are not really about what happened. They are about the meaning each person gave to what happened. You may become angry because someone spoke briefly to you. They may simply be tired. You interpret their tiredness as rejection. Then you respond coldly. They notice your coldness and become defensive. Now both people are upset. Neither one originally intended harm. Expectation and interpretation created the conflict. This does not mean you should ignore patterns of poor behavior. Buddhist acceptance is not pretending people are always innocent. Some people lie, some manipulate, some repeatedly break promises, some are careless with other people's feelings. Seeing people as they are includes seeing these things clearly. The difference is that you stop confusing acceptance with approval. Acceptance says, this is what this person is currently showing me. Approval says, this behavior is acceptable. You can accept reality without approving of it. That is one of the most important forms of emotional maturity. Suppose someone repeatedly fails to keep their word. A controlling response says, how do I make them become reliable? A wiser response says, "They have shown me that they are unreliable. How should I respond to that reality?" Now your attention returns to your own choices. Maybe you stop depending on them for important things. Maybe you reduce contact. Maybe you have a direct conversation. Maybe you change the kind of relationship you have. This is very different from spending years trying to transform somebody who has shown little desire to change. Many people lose peace because they keep arguing with evidence. They say, "But they should know better." Maybe they should. They should appreciate me. Maybe they should. They should apologize. Maybe they should. But what are they actually doing? That is the question that brings you back to reality. Buddhist teachings repeatedly invite us to see clearly. Not what we wish were happening, not what we believe ought to happen, what is happening. When you look clearly, you may discover that some of your suffering comes from loving potential more than reality. You see what a person could become. You see their good side. You remember their kind moments. You remember what they promised. Then you build a future around that possibility. But if their actions keep showing something different, your hope can become another form of attachment. You are no longer relating to the person in front of you. You are relating to the person you hope they will someday become. This can happen in romantic relationships. Someone tells you they are not ready for commitment. You hear the words, but you think, "If I love them enough, they will change." Someone is emotionally unavailable. You think, "If I am patient enough, they will finally open up." Someone repeatedly hurts you. You think, deep down, they are a good person. One day, they will understand. Sometimes people do change. Human beings are capable of great transformation, but change cannot be forced from outside. That is the part the controlling mind struggles to accept. You can create conditions that support change. You can speak honestly. You can encourage. You can forgive wisely. But you cannot perform another person's inner work for them. They have to see. They have to choose. They have to practice. They have to become willing. When you try to do that work for them, you may slowly lose yourself. Your mood becomes dependent on their progress. If they improve, you feel hopeful. If they fall back into old habits, you feel crushed. You become more focused on their behavior than on your own peace. This is why wanting people to behave differently can become a prison. Your happiness gets tied to choices you do not control. You may wake up thinking about what somebody else should do. You may spend the day analyzing why they did not do it. You may go to sleep angry that they still have not changed. Meanwhile, the person may be living their life without carrying the same battle in their mind. You are the one holding the argument. This is one of the most painful truths about resentment. The person you resent does not have to be present for resentment to keep hurting you. They can be miles away. They may not even know you are upset. But inside you, the conversation continues. You replay what they did. You prepare what you would say. You imagine how they should apologize. You think about what they should finally understand. The mind tries to achieve justice through repeated thought. But repeated thought rarely changes the past. It only keeps the emotional wound open. Buddhist practice does not ask you to deny hurt. If someone treated you badly, that matters. If someone betrayed you, your pain deserves to be acknowledged. But there is a difference between honoring pain and building a home inside it. At some point, healing requires giving up the demand that another person must behave differently before you can move forward. This can be very hard. You may want an apology. You may deserve an apology. But if your peace depends on receiving it, the person who hurt you still controls part of your inner life. They decide whether you get closure. They decide whether you are allowed to move on. Buddhist freedom means slowly taking that power back. You can say, "What happened was painful, and I would have preferred a different response. But I will not wait forever for another person to become the person I needed them to be." That is not weakness. That is release. There is also suffering in expecting people to love the same way you love. You may show care through words, Another person shows care through actions. You may want frequent communication. They may value quiet presence. You may think affection should be expressed openly. They may have grown up in a family where affection was rarely spoken. Without awareness, these differences can become accusations. If you loved me, you would say it more. If you cared, you would call more often. If you respected me, you would agree with me. But love is not always expressed in the exact language you expect. This does not mean you should accept relationships that never meet your needs. It means you should learn to communicate needs instead of silently testing people against standards they may not know exist. Many people create suffering by expecting others to read their minds. They do something kind and secretly expect the same in return. They make a sacrifice and expect recognition. They stay quiet about what they need and become angry when nobody notices. Then they say, "I shouldn't have to ask." But clear communication is not a failure of love. It is often a sign of maturity. If something matters, say it. I would appreciate more communication. It hurt me when that happened. I need time to think. I cannot continue this if the behavior keeps happening. These statements are clearer than silent expectation. They give another person the opportunity to understand. Then their response gives you useful information. This is healthier than hoping they will magically become the person you want. Another source of suffering is expecting people to behave according to your sense of fairness. You may believe that if you are kind, others should be kind. If you are loyal, others should be loyal. If you tell the truth, others should tell the truth. These are beautiful values. But the world is full of people at different levels of awareness. Some are generous, some are selfish, some are honest, some are deceptive, some are deeply thoughtful, some are careless. If you believe everyone should naturally behave according to your values, you will be repeatedly shocked. This is not a reason to become cynical. It is a reason to become discerning. There is a difference between trusting wisely and expecting blindly. Buddhist wisdom does not tell you to hate difficult people. It tells you to see clearly. A snake is not evil because it can bite. But wisdom does not put a hand near its mouth. In the same way, compassion does not require foolish trust. You can understand that someone is acting from ignorance, anger, greed, insecurity, or confusion, and still protect yourself from their behavior. You do not need to punish them emotionally. You do not need to spend years asking, "Why are they like this?" Sometimes the clearest answer is simply, "This is where they are right now." That answer may not satisfy the mind because the mind wants a deeper explanation. But explanation does not always create peace. You can understand every reason behind someone's behavior and still need distance from them. Understanding is not obligation. Compassion is not permission. Forgiveness is not automatic access. This is where Buddhist wisdom becomes very practical. You can wish someone well from far away. You can release hatred while maintaining a boundary. You can understand their suffering without volunteering to become the place where they continue expressing it. This protects both compassion and dignity. Another expectation that creates suffering is the belief that people should remain the same. You become close to someone because of who they were 5 years ago. Then they change. Their interests change. Their priorities change. Their beliefs change. Perhaps the relationship changes with them. The mind may resist this. You used to call me every day. You used to enjoy spending time with me. You used to agree with me. You have changed. Yes, they may have changed. So have you. Impermanence does not only apply to bodies, possessions, and circumstances. It applies to personalities and relationships. Some relationships deepen, some become quieter, some end, some disappear for years and return in a different form. Trying to freeze people at the point where they made you happiest is another form of attachment. You may love who someone was, but you still have to meet who they are now. That is difficult because memory can compete with reality. You remember the old conversations, the old affection, the old closeness. Then you compare today with yesterday and feel that something has gone wrong. Sometimes something has gone wrong, but sometimes life has simply moved. Buddhist practice teaches us not to demand that changing things remain unchanged. This applies even to our relationship with parents. Many adults carry deep expectations about what their parents should have been. My mother should have understood me. My father should have supported me. My parents should have been more loving. There may be real grief in these statements. Some people did not receive the care they needed. Acceptance does not erase that truth. But adulthood sometimes brings the difficult task of grieving the parent you needed but did not have. As long as you keep demanding that the past become different, part of you remains trapped there. You may still be waiting for words that never came, still waiting for approval, still waiting for affection, still waiting for someone to finally understand what they did. Healing can begin when you stop asking the past to give you what it did not give. This is painful, but it is also freeing. You begin looking at what you can give yourself now. The kindness you wanted, the respect you needed, the boundaries that were missing, the understanding you searched for. Buddhist compassion includes learning to stop repeating another person's lack of kindness inside your own mind. If someone spoke harshly to you for years, you do not have to continue speaking harshly to yourself. If someone failed to see your worth, you do not have to spend the rest of your life proving your worth to everyone. If someone never apologized, you do not have to carry their silence forever. This is how expectation begins to loosen. You stop making your present dependent on another person's transformation. There is also suffering in expecting strangers to behave reasonably. Traffic teaches this quickly. Someone drives badly and anger rises. They should know better. Someone cuts in line. They should be more considerate. Someone speaks loudly in public. They should have manners. Again, perhaps they should. But the question is not whether your judgment is correct. The question is what happens inside you when reality refuses to match it. You can spend the next hour angry at a stranger who has already forgotten you exist. This is not justice, it is self-punishment. Buddhist practice invites you to choose carefully what deserves space in your mind. Not every foolish person deserves your anger. Not every rude comment deserves your evening. Not every disagreement deserves a battle. You can recognize poor behavior without mentally carrying the person home with you. This requires letting go of the need to correct everybody. Some people become exhausted because they feel responsible for teaching everyone a lesson. Someone behaves badly, and they must explain. Someone holds a different opinion, and they must convince them. Someone misunderstands, and they must prove themselves. But not every mind is open at every moment. Trying to force understanding onto someone who does not want to understand is another form of control. There are conversations that help. There are also conversations that only repeat suffering. Wisdom means knowing the difference. Ask yourself, is this person actually listening? Is this conversation creating clarity? Am I speaking because something useful can happen or because I cannot tolerate being misunderstood? Sometimes silence protects your peace better than another explanation. This does not mean you become afraid to speak. It means you stop wasting words where there is no space to receive them. The Buddha often emphasized wise speech, and wise speech is not simply saying true things. It also involves knowing when speech is useful, timely, and likely to reduce suffering. That is very different from trying to control how everyone sees you. Another painful expectation is expecting gratitude. You help someone, you give your time, you make sacrifices, then they seem ungrateful. This can hurt deeply, but hidden generosity can sometimes become a contract. I did this for you, Therefore, you should respond this way. If you genuinely need something in return, it is better to be honest about that. Otherwise, your gift may quietly become a demand. Buddhist generosity is powerful, partly because it loosens this expectation. You give because giving reflects your values. If gratitude comes, receive it. If it does not, learn from the situation. Perhaps you need healthier boundaries around what you give, but do not let somebody's lack of gratitude turn your kindness into bitterness. The lesson may not be never help anyone again. The lesson may be give without abandoning yourself. That is different. Expectations also become painful when they are never spoken. You may believe a friend should call more. Have you told them that the friendship matters to you? You may believe your partner should help more. Have you clearly discussed what help means? You may believe your adult children should visit often. Have you spoken openly without guilt or pressure? Clear requests are healthier than secret tests. A request gives the other person freedom to respond. A demand assumes they owe you compliance. This distinction is important. You are allowed to have needs. Buddhist non-attachment does not mean pretending you need nothing. You can ask. You can express preferences. You can choose relationships that fit your values. The suffering comes when a preference becomes an absolute demand. I would love for you to spend more time with me is different from, if you loved me, you would spend more time with me. The first communicates. The second controls through guilt. One leaves room for dialogue. The other turns affection into proof. People often resist when they feel controlled. Then the controlling person becomes more intense. The more intense they become, the more the other person withdraws. Then the withdrawal creates more fear. This becomes a painful cycle. A parent asks too many questions because they are worried. The adult child feels watched and shares less. The parent notices they are sharing less and asks even more questions. Soon, both sides feel misunderstood. The parent says, "You never tell me anything." The child says, "Because you turn everything into an interrogation." Neither person necessarily lacks love, but fear has changed the form of communication. Sometimes loosening control is what allows closeness to return. When people feel they can speak without immediately being corrected, they may become more open. When they feel their choices will be respected, they may ask for advice more willingly. This is a paradox. The more desperately you try to control someone's behavior, the less influence you may have. Respect creates a different kind of influence. People are more likely to listen when they do not feel they are being forced. This applies to friendships, marriages, workplaces, and families. Another important lesson is that disappointment does not always mean someone has wronged you. Sometimes disappointment simply means reality was different from your expectation. A friend could not attend an event. A family member forgot something important. A colleague chose another idea. You may feel disappointed. That feeling is valid. But before creating a larger story, ask whether the person actually violated something important or whether life simply did not match what you hoped. This question can prevent small disappointments from becoming unnecessary conflict. Not every unmet expectation is betrayal. Not every disagreement is rejection. Not every difference is disrespect. The controlling mind often turns difference into danger because it wants sameness. But peaceful relationships require room. Room for different opinions, different moods, different ways of communicating, different dreams, different timelines. You do not lose yourself by allowing other people to be different. In fact, you often discover yourself more clearly. You learn what truly matters to you and what was simply habit. You learn which values require boundaries and which preferences can be flexible. This makes relationships less exhausting. Instead of constantly trying to shape the other person, you begin asking whether the relationship, as it actually exists, is healthy for you. That question is much more useful. You do not need to transform everybody. Sometimes you need to accept them. Sometimes you need to forgive them. Sometimes you need to communicate more clearly. Sometimes you need to lower an unrealistic expectation. And sometimes you need to walk away. All of these choices begin with seeing reality clearly. This is why acceptance is not weakness. It removes illusion. You stop saying, maybe if I try harder, they will become different. You start saying, this is what they are showing me. What does wisdom ask me to do? That question returns your power. You cannot choose another person's behavior, but you can choose what behavior you remain close to. You cannot force respect, but you can refuse to stay where disrespect is constant. You cannot force someone to understand your heart, but you can stop explaining yourself endlessly to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot make someone love you, but you can stop treating their inability to love you as proof that you are unworthy. This is the freedom hidden inside acceptance. You stop using another person's behavior as the ruler by which you measure your own value. Somebody rejecting you does not automatically mean you are unlovable. Somebody criticizing you does not automatically mean you are wrong. Somebody failing to appreciate you does not make your kindness worthless. Another person's behavior often tells you more about their state of mind than about your worth. Buddhist teachings repeatedly remind us that people act from causes and conditions. Someone may be angry because they are suffering. Someone may be distant because they are afraid. Someone may be selfish because they have spent years protecting themselves. Someone may be harsh because harshness is what they learned. Understanding this can soften hatred, but again, understanding does not require allowing harm. It simply helps you stop taking every action personally. Sometimes people are not behaving against you. They are behaving from themselves. That distinction can bring enormous peace. The rude stranger may not be thinking about you at all. The distant friend may be carrying a private burden. The impatient relative may be struggling with their own fear. You do not know every cause behind another person's behavior. This humility protects you from creating unnecessary stories. Instead of immediately saying, they did this because they do not respect me, you can say, I do not know everything happening inside them. That does not erase your boundaries. It simply reduces false certainty. And there is another freedom that comes when you stop demanding specific behavior from people. You become more capable of seeing goodness when it arrives in forms you did not expect. Maybe your father rarely said, I love you, but repaired things whenever you needed help. Maybe your friend does not call often, but arrives when you are in trouble. Maybe your partner is not highly expressive, but remembers small practical details that make your life easier. Expectations can sometimes make us blind to what is actually being offered because we are focused on what is missing. This does not mean accepting less than you truly need. It means seeing completely. Not only the absence, not only the disappointment, the whole person. And when you see the whole person, you may make wiser choices. You may appreciate them more. You may understand them better. Or you may finally recognize that the relationship is not healthy enough to continue. Either way, clarity is better than forcing. The Buddhist path does not promise that people will become easier. Some will disappoint you. Some will leave. Some will misunderstand you. Some will make choices that hurt you. Some will remain exactly as they are despite every lesson life offers them. Peace does not come from finally teaching everyone how to behave. Peace comes from accepting that you are surrounded by human beings, not characters written according to your preferences. Human beings are imperfect. They are unpredictable. They carry wounds you cannot see. They make mistakes. They change their minds. They fail. They surprise you, and so do you. This last point matters. It is easy to become frustrated with the imperfections of others, while forgetting your own. You have disappointed people too. You have misunderstood someone. You have failed to say the right thing. You have been distracted when someone needed attention. You have made decisions others could not understand. Remembering this can create compassion, not foolish tolerance, compassion. You begin to understand that relationships are not built between perfect people. They are built between changing, imperfect minds trying to understand one another. The goal is not to remove every disappointment. The goal is to stop turning every disappointment into suffering through rigid expectation. You can prefer, you can request, you can communicate, you can set limits. But then you must allow reality to answer. If the answer is yes, receive it. If the answer is no, decide what you will do. That is much healthier than spending years trying to force a different answer. So when somebody does not behave the way you expected, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, did this person truly do something harmful, or did they simply do something different from what I wanted? Then ask, what expectation was I carrying? Maybe the expectation was reasonable and should be communicated. Maybe it was never spoken. Maybe it came from fear. Maybe it came from old family habits. Maybe it came from believing everyone should think like you. Seeing the expectation gives you choice. Without awareness, expectation controls your reaction. With awareness, you can decide whether to express it, adjust it, or release it. And once you begin releasing the need for people to follow your inner script, relationships start feeling different. You listen more. You argue less. You stop trying to win every disagreement. You become less shocked by difference. You begin seeing people instead of seeing only what you hoped they would become. That does not guarantee that every relationship survives. Sometimes clear seeing reveals that distance is necessary. But even then, there can be less bitterness. You can leave without spending years trying to prove that the other person should have been different. You can simply understand, this is who they chose to be, and this is what I choose for myself. That is freedom. And once this kind of freedom begins, another form of control becomes easier to notice. If you cannot control people, perhaps the mind says you can at least control what comes next. So it begins planning further ahead, trying to arrange tomorrow, next month, next year, and every possible future problem before it arrives. But there is a hidden price for living too far ahead. While the mind is busy securing the future, the present can quietly disappear. And this is where the mind makes another quiet mistake. After realizing that people cannot always be controlled, it often turns toward time. It starts believing that if the future can be planned carefully enough, then life will finally feel safe. So you think further ahead, prepare for more possibilities, build more backup plans, and try to remove every surprise before it appears. But while the mind is living in next week, next month, or next year, something precious is being lost. The present is passing without being fully lived. Planning is not the enemy. Wise planning can protect you from unnecessary problems. It can help you save money, prepare for important responsibilities, care for your health, and move toward meaningful goals. The suffering begins when planning stops being a useful tool and becomes a place where the mind lives most of the time. There is a difference between preparing for the future and mentally moving into it. Preparation says, this is what I can do today to make tomorrow easier. Over-planning says, I need to know exactly how tomorrow will unfold before I can feel calm. That difference may look small, but emotionally it is enormous. When you prepare wisely, you take action and return to the present. When you overplan, the mind keeps going. You finish one plan and immediately create another. You solve one possible problem and then ask what happens if that solution fails. You think about the trip, then what could go wrong on the trip, then what happens if those things go wrong, then what you will do afterward. The mind keeps extending itself into a future that has not happened. At first, this can feel productive. You may even feel proud of how prepared you are. But there comes a point when preparation stops reducing difficulty and starts producing it. You may begin feeling tense about events that are months away. You may lose sleep over decisions you do not need to make yet. You may spend a peaceful afternoon thinking about a problem that may never exist. Then, when tomorrow finally arrives, the mind is already living somewhere beyond it. This is how a person can spend years preparing to live without ever feeling that life has truly begun. The Buddhist path repeatedly brings attention back to the present because this is the only place where life can actually be experienced. You can remember yesterday, but you cannot live there. You can think about tomorrow, but you cannot live there either. You can only live now. That sounds simple, but many minds resist it. The present can feel too small. The future feels more important. There are things to accomplish, things to protect, things to become. So the mind begins saying, I will relax when. I will relax when I have more money. I will relax when the children are settled. I will relax when this project is finished. I will relax when I know what is going to happen. I will relax when life becomes less complicated. The problem is that when keeps moving. You reach one point and another condition appears. The children become independent, but now you worry about whether they are making good choices. You earn more money, but now you worry about protecting what you have. You finish one project, but another responsibility begins. You solve one problem, but life produces another. If peace is always scheduled for later, later becomes a place you never actually reach. This is one of the quiet dangers of living too far ahead. You begin postponing peace. Buddhist teachings invite you to see how often the mind does this. There may be nothing seriously wrong with the current moment, yet the mind refuses to rest because of something that might happen later. You could be sitting in a comfortable room. You could be healthy enough today. You could have food. You could be speaking with someone you love. But the mind says, yes, but what about next month? And just like that, the present moment is no longer enough. This does not mean future concerns are meaningless. If there is a bill due next month, you should prepare. If there is a medical appointment, remember it. If you are planning for retirement, think carefully. But there is a difference between responsible preparation and emotional occupation. Responsible preparation has an ending. You make the plan. You take the necessary step. Then you return. Emotional occupation has no ending. You remain inside the plan mentally. You visit it again and again as though repeating the same thought can give you more control. This is why some people feel mentally tired long before anything difficult happens. They have already lived through the event 10 times in their head. Before the meeting happens, they have replayed every possible conversation. Before the trip begins, they have mentally experienced every possible delay. Before the test result arrives, they have imagined every possible outcome. Before the relationship conversation occurs, they have already fought, reconciled, separated, and started over in thought. The body does not always know the difference between a real event and an intensely imagined one. If the mind repeatedly creates stressful scenes, the body can respond with real tension. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, sleep becomes harder, appetite changes. The person may feel physically worn down by a future that has not arrived. This is one reason Buddhist mindfulness is so practical. It does not ask you to pretend the future does not exist. It asks you to notice when thought has gone somewhere your body cannot follow. You are here. The mind is 3 months ahead. Bring it back. Feel the chair beneath you. Notice your breathing. Look at what is actually happening. Ask, what needs my attention now? This question can be powerful because much of what you worry about may not require action yet. Some problems cannot be solved early. You may not have enough information. You may not know what other people will decide. Circumstances may change completely before the moment arrives. Planning too early can sometimes create false confidence. You build a detailed picture of how something must happen. Then life gives you new information and everything shifts. Now, the plan that was supposed to create peace creates frustration. This was not how it was supposed to go. But perhaps nothing truly went wrong. Reality simply refused to follow a picture created too early. This is the difference between direction and attachment. Direction is useful. You know roughly where you want to go. Attachment insists on the exact path. You can have a goal without demanding that every step happen according to schedule. This flexibility is deeply connected to Buddhist wisdom. The future is created through countless causes and conditions. Your actions matter, but they are not the only causes involved. Other people act. Weather changes, economies shift, bodies change, opportunities appear, unexpected problems arrive, new information changes decisions. No plan can include every condition because many of them do not exist yet. So a wise plan must remain alive. It must be able to change. A rigid plan says, this must happen. A flexible plan says, this is the best direction I can see right now. I will adjust if reality teaches me something new. The second approach creates less suffering because it leaves room for life. There is also an emotional cost to constantly thinking ahead. You may stop noticing ordinary happiness. A cup of tea becomes something you drink while checking tomorrow's schedule. A conversation becomes something you half hear while planning what must be done afterward. A walk becomes another opportunity to solve problems in your head. Even rest becomes preparation. You lie down, but the mind is still working. This is how beautiful moments become background noise. You are technically present, but your attention is somewhere else. Later, you may look back and say, those were good years, but while they were happening, perhaps you were too worried about the next stage to recognize them. This is one of the saddest forms of suffering, not losing good moments, failing to notice them while they are still yours. Buddhism teaches that everything is impermanent, and this makes the present more precious, not less. The meal in front of you will end. The person sitting beside you will not always be sitting there. Your body will not always have the strength it has today. The home you live in may one day change. The people you worry about protecting may one day build lives of their own. When you understand impermanence, you do not need to become frightened. You become attentive. You realize this moment will not return in exactly this form. That understanding can make simple things sacred. You listen more carefully. You eat more slowly. You look at the face of someone you love instead of staring past them into tomorrow. You stop treating ordinary days as something to get through on the way to something more important. Planning too far ahead can also make the future feel heavier than it actually is. A problem that would be manageable if it arrived today can feel terrifying when imagined repeatedly for months. This happens because the mind keeps adding emotional weight. Suppose you know you will need to have a difficult conversation in 2 weeks. The actual conversation may last 30 minutes, but if you think about it every day for 2 weeks, you may suffer for hours before it happens. You pay for the same event again and again. This is unnecessary interest added by the mind. The event itself may be difficult, but the mental rehearsal makes the total suffering far greater. This does not mean you should avoid preparation. You can decide what you want to say. Write down the important points. Think about the right time, then stop. Return to your life. You do not need to rehearse the emotional pain endlessly. There is wisdom in saying, "I have prepared enough for today." That sentence creates a boundary with thought. Many people have boundaries with others, but no boundaries with their own planning. They allow the mind to work on tomorrow at any hour, while eating, while resting, while trying to sleep, while speaking with family. The mind is allowed to interrupt everything. You can change this. You can create a time for planning. Sit down, review what needs attention, take notes, make decisions, then close it. If the mind returns later, you can remind yourself, "This has already been considered. I will return to it at the right time." This does not always stop the thought immediately, but it teaches the mind that every thought does not deserve immediate attention. That is a very important skill, because the future-minded brain often treats each new idea as urgent. What if I forget? Write it down. What if something changes? You can adjust later. What if I have not thought of everything? You never will, and that last truth can be surprisingly freeing. You do not need to think of everything. No human being can. This is where humility becomes peaceful. The controlling mind feels responsible for predicting the whole road. The wise mind only asks, "What is the next clear step?" That is much lighter. You may not know how the next 5 years will unfold, but perhaps you know what needs to be done today. You may not know how your career will look in 10 years, but you may know what skill you need to learn this month. You may not know what will happen to a relationship, but you may know that one honest conversation is needed now. You may not know everything about your health in the future, but you know whether you can take care of your body today. The next clear step is often enough. This way of living keeps you connected to reality, because action can only happen now. You cannot save money tomorrow today. You can save money today for tomorrow. You cannot become healthier next year today. You can make a healthy choice now that influences next year. You cannot solve a future conversation. You can become calmer and clearer before it arrives. The present is where the future is actually being shaped. That is a beautiful paradox. The best way to prepare for tomorrow is often to stop mentally living there and act wisely here. Another problem with planning too far ahead is that it can create attachment to a future version of yourself. You may say, "When I achieve this, I will finally feel successful. When I lose this weight, I will feel confident. When I own that house, I will feel secure. When I retire, I will enjoy life. When I find the right person, I will feel complete." This creates a painful division. The current you becomes a temporary person, someone who is not enough yet, someone who must reach a future condition before life becomes meaningful. Then every day becomes preparation for becoming someone else. Buddhist teachings challenge this deeply. They remind you that identity itself is changing. There is no final version of you waiting at the end of achievement. You will continue changing. New desires will appear. New problems will come. New understanding will grow. If you cannot find enoughness anywhere in the present, no future achievement can guarantee it. This does not mean ambition is wrong. You can grow, you can improve, you can build, but growth does not require rejecting your present life. You can say, "I want to improve this," without saying, "I cannot be at peace until it improves." That is a healthier relationship with goals. A goal gives direction. It should not hold your peace hostage. Planning too far ahead can also damage relationships because other people become pieces in your future picture. You may already know where you think the relationship should go. You may have a timeline. Marriage by this point, children by that point, retirement here, living in this place, family behaving this way. Then another person's wishes appear, and suddenly the future picture feels threatened. Instead of meeting them as they are, you may begin trying to fit them into your plan. This creates pressure. People can feel when they are being treated as part of a schedule rather than as living human beings. The more tightly you hold a future picture, the harder it becomes to hear what is actually happening now. Maybe the relationship needs healing. Maybe someone has doubts. Maybe priorities have changed. Maybe the future still exists, but in another form. If all your attention is on preserving the plan, you may miss the truth of the relationship. Buddhist awareness asks you to value truth more than fantasy. A beautiful plan built on ignored reality is not security. It is delay. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let new information change the plan. There is also a fear beneath long-range planning that is rarely spoken aloud. The fear of wasted time. People think, I need to make sure I am doing the right thing because I do not want to waste years. This is understandable. Time matters. But the fear of wasting time can itself waste time. You become so focused on making the perfect choice that you delay living. You stay in constant comparison. Should I be somewhere else? Should I have achieved more by now? Am I falling behind? The present becomes a measuring station. You are no longer experiencing life. You are constantly evaluating whether life is on schedule. This creates anxiety because there is no universal schedule. One person finds their work early, another changes direction at 50, one marries young, another finds companionship much later, one builds wealth quickly, another spends years caring for family and starts again later. Life does not unfold according to one clock. When you compare your life to an imagined timeline, you create pressure that may have nothing to do with reality. Buddhist teachings encourage freedom from comparison because comparison pulls attention away from direct experience. Instead of asking, "Am I where everyone else is?" ask, "Am I living wisely with the life I actually have?" That question is more useful because you do not live everyone else's life. You live this one. Planning can also become a way to avoid difficult feelings in the present. This is subtle. Sometimes the future feels easier to think about than the present feels to experience. If you are lonely now, you may spend hours planning the life you will have when you meet someone. If you are unhappy in your work, you may constantly fantasize about a future career without taking one practical step. If you are grieving, you may fill your time with plans because sitting still would bring sadness to the surface. The future becomes a distraction. It gives the mind somewhere to escape. But feelings that are constantly avoided do not disappear. They wait. Buddhist practice teaches you to turn toward experience gently. What is here right now? Maybe sadness, maybe fear, maybe boredom, maybe disappointment. You do not have to fix it immediately. You can feel it without building a future to escape from it. This creates emotional honesty, and emotional honesty often reveals what action is actually needed. Perhaps you do need a new job. Perhaps you do need more social connection. Perhaps something in your life must change. But change becomes wiser when it grows from clear seeing rather than from running away. Another way over-planning steals peace is by making rest feel undeserved. There is always something else to prepare, something else to organize, something else you could do now to make later easier, so you keep going, even when tired, even when nothing urgent remains. Rest begins to feel irresponsible. But rest is part of wise living. A mind that never stops preparing eventually becomes less clear. A tired person does not necessarily make better plans because they spent more hours thinking. Sometimes stepping away reveals what constant effort could not. This is why Buddhist traditions value stillness. Stillness is not wasted time. It allows the mind to settle. When muddy water is left alone, the dirt gradually falls and the water becomes clear. If you keep stirring it, clarity never arrives. The mind can be like this. When you repeatedly disturb it with plans, possibilities, and future problems, you may believe you are searching for clarity while actually preventing it. Sometimes the answer comes when thinking stops. A walk, a quiet meal, a few slow breaths, a night of sleep. Then something that felt impossible the day before suddenly looks simple. Planning has its proper time. So does not planning. Knowing the difference is wisdom. There is another important lesson in uncertainty. The future sometimes contains gifts you could never have planned. A chance meeting, a new friendship, an unexpected opportunity, a change that first looks disappointing but leads somewhere better. If you become too attached to the future you designed, you may reject the future life is offering. You may call an unexpected change a failure only because it does not match your original picture. Later, you may discover it redirected you towards something valuable. This is not a reason to pretend every loss is secretly good. Some losses are simply painful, but it is a reason to leave space for possibility. You do not know all the ways life can unfold. That uncertainty is not only frightening, it is also where surprise lives, where growth lives, where new paths appear. The same unknown future that contains possible difficulty also contains possible joy. The anxious mind usually forgets this. It treats uncertainty as though it only hides danger, but uncertainty is neutral. You do not know what will happen. That includes things better than you expected. Buddhist non-attachment allows this openness. You move toward what seems wise while keeping your hands open. If something changes, you respond. If another path appears, you look at it. If the plan still works, you continue. This way, you are committed without becoming rigid. You are prepared without becoming consumed. You are hopeful without demanding. A simple practice can help you recognize when planning has gone too far. When you find yourself thinking repeatedly about the future, ask 3 questions. Is there something useful I can do about this now? If there is, what is the smallest clear action? If there is nothing to do now, can I allow this to remain unfinished? That final question is where the practice becomes difficult. Can you allow something to remain unfinished? The mind may want closure, a decision, a guarantee, but some things are not ready. Trying to finish them early only creates false answers. Sometimes you truly have to wait. This waiting can become a meditation, not passive waiting, aware waiting. You notice the urge to push time forward. You notice the discomfort of not knowing. Then you return to what is here. This teaches patience at a deeper level. You begin understanding that your life is not a problem waiting to be completed. It is an experience unfolding moment by moment. That changes how you treat ordinary days. Monday is not simply a bridge to Friday. This year is not simply a bridge to next year. Your current age is not simply preparation for some future version of yourself. There may be goals ahead, but this is still your life. This day counts. This conversation counts. This meal counts. This quiet evening counts. You do not need a dramatic event to give the present value. Attention gives it value, and when attention returns, peace often returns with it. Not perfect peace, not permanent peace, but enough peace to breathe without mentally carrying the next 5 years. This is how Buddhist mindfulness gently reduces the burden of time. Yesterday is released, tomorrow is not dragged forward, today becomes manageable. You do what can be done. You leave what cannot yet be done. Then you allow the day to end. There is great mercy in that. You are not required to solve your entire life tonight. You do not need to know who will remain beside you 10 years from now. You do not need every answer about your career. You do not need certainty about every future difficulty. You need enough wisdom for the step in front of you. And sometimes even that step becomes clear only after you stop trying to see the entire road. So plan where planning is useful. Put money aside, make appointments, set goals, prepare for responsibilities. Think ahead when thinking ahead creates wise action, but learn to recognize the moment planning changes into mental wandering, the moment the same possibilities begin repeating, the moment tomorrow starts stealing today's attention, the moment a plan becomes a demand. Then come back to your breath, back to the room, back to the person sitting with you, back to the task your hands can actually touch, back to life as it exists instead of life as you are trying to arrange it. Because you may someday reach the future you have been preparing for and discover that it feels very ordinary. You may achieve the goal and immediately begin planning the next one. You may finally receive what you wanted and realize your mind never learned how to rest. This is why peace must be practiced before the future arrives. Otherwise, the future cannot give you what you never learned to receive. And once you begin loosening this habit of living too far ahead, another form of control becomes much easier to see. Planning is often tied to a hidden demand that all this effort must produce the outcome you want. You prepare carefully, work hard, do everything you believe is right, and then quietly expect life to reward you in a particular way. But when the outcome still changes, the pain can become much greater because now the mind says, "After everything I did, this was not supposed to happen." That is where the next lesson begins. Why trying to control outcomes can make failure hurt far more than it needs to. And this is where planning can turn into another kind of suffering. You prepare carefully, make sacrifices, think ahead, work hard, and quietly begin to believe that all this effort should guarantee a certain result. You tell yourself that if you do everything right, life should respond in the right way. But then something fails. The opportunity disappears, the relationship ends, the plan collapses, the result does not match the effort. And now the pain is not only about what happened, it is also about the belief that it was never supposed to happen this way. Failure hurts everyone, but trying to control the outcome can make it hurt much more. This happens because the mind does not only want to influence what happens, it wants certainty. It wants to know that effort will always produce reward, kindness will always produce kindness, loyalty will always produce loyalty, and careful choices will always protect us from disappointment. But life does not make that agreement. You can prepare well and still lose. You can work hard and still be rejected. You can love deeply and still be left. You can make a wise decision and still face a painful result. You can take care of your body and still become ill. You can save money and still face an unexpected expense. This does not mean effort is useless. It means effort and outcome are not the same thing. That distinction is one of the most important lessons in Buddhist practice. Your actions matter, your intentions matter, your discipline matters, but your actions enter a world filled with other causes and conditions. Other people make choices, circumstances change, timing changes, events happen that you could not predict, so you can guide an outcome, but you cannot fully own it. The controlling mind does not like this. It says, if I work hard enough, I must succeed. Then if success does not come, the mind does not simply feel disappointed, it feels betrayed. It asks, what was all that effort for? It begins searching for someone to blame. Sometimes it blames another person. Sometimes it blames life. Sometimes it turns the blame inward. I am a failure. This is where suffering becomes much heavier. An outcome happened, but then you turned the outcome into an identity. You failed at something. That is not the same as being a failure. The difference seems obvious when written down, but emotionally, people confuse them all the time. A business fails. I am terrible at everything. A relationship ends. I am impossible to love. A job application is rejected. I am not good enough. A plan does not work. I always ruin things. The mind takes one event and makes it a statement about the whole self. This is why attachment to outcomes can become dangerous. The more of your identity you place inside a result, the more devastating that result becomes if it does not go your way. If you believe success proves your worth, then failure seems to remove your worth. If you believe being chosen proves that you are lovable, rejection feels like proof that you are not. If you believe winning proves that you are capable, losing feels like evidence that you are weak. But your worth is much larger than one outcome. Buddhist teachings help loosen this identification. They remind us that experience is constantly changing. Today you succeed, tomorrow you struggle. Today someone praises you, tomorrow someone criticizes you. Today a plan works beautifully. Tomorrow, something unexpected destroys the plan. If your identity rises and falls with every result, your inner life becomes unstable. You become emotionally controlled by circumstances. When things go well, you feel powerful. When they go badly, you collapse. This is not freedom. Freedom begins when you learn to give your best without making your entire sense of self depend on what comes back. This is not an excuse to stop caring. It is not saying, results do not matter. Results matter. They teach you. They show what worked and what did not. They reveal where improvement is needed, but they should be information, not a final judgment on your value. There is a difference between saying, this did not work, and saying, I am useless. The first statement can help you learn. The second statement only creates shame. Shame rarely makes you wiser. It usually makes you afraid. Then the next time you try something, you are not simply working towards success. You are trying to avoid feeling worthless. That pressure makes every decision heavier. You become afraid to take risks. You may avoid new opportunities because you do not want to fail again. You may stay in familiar situations because they feel safer. You may spend too long preparing because you believe the next attempt must be perfect. This is how one painful result can begin controlling the future. The original failure ends, but the fear of repeating it remains. Buddhist wisdom asks you to separate pain from the story you build around pain. Pain says, this mattered to me and it did not work. The story says, this proves my life is going nowhere. Pain says, I am disappointed. The story says, nothing ever works for me. Pain says, I lost something. The story says, I will never have anything good again. The first part may be unavoidable. The second part is often where additional suffering grows. You do not need to pretend failure feels good. There is no wisdom in forcing yourself to smile after losing something important. If you are disappointed, be disappointed. If you need to grieve, grieve. If you are angry, notice the anger. Buddhist practice does not ask you to remove human emotion. It asks you not to make the emotion permanent through attachment. Feel what is true, but do not build your identity there. The controlling mind often makes failure worse because it keeps returning to the same question. Why did this happen? There are times when this question is useful. Maybe you made a mistake that can be corrected. Maybe you ignored important information. Maybe there is something to learn. But after the useful lesson has been found, the mind may continue asking, why me? Why now? Why after everything I did? At that point, the question is no longer searching for information. It is protesting reality. It wants an answer that will somehow undo what happened. But some outcomes cannot be undone through understanding. Sometimes the reason is simple. Things changed. Someone made a different choice. The timing was wrong. The opportunity was not yours. The conditions were not there. This can feel unsatisfying because the mind wants a complete explanation. It believes that if it can fully explain failure, it can prevent failure forever. But that promise is impossible. There will always be uncertainty. This is why some failures remain emotionally painful long after the event itself. The mind is still trying to control the past. It replays the moment. If I had said something different, if I had gone there earlier, if I had noticed the signs, if I had waited, there may be truth in some of these reflections. Maybe a different choice would have changed the outcome, but there is a limit to how much the past can teach you. Once the lesson is clear, continuing to replay it becomes punishment. You cannot send your present wisdom backward in time. You made that decision with the understanding, emotions, and information you had then. Today you know more. That is growth. But growth becomes suffering when you use today's knowledge to attack yesterday's self. Buddhist compassion should include the person you used to be. That person did not know everything you know now. They may have been afraid. They may have been inexperienced. They may have been desperate. They may have trusted someone they should not have trusted. You can learn without hating them. You can say, I would choose differently now, without saying, I was stupid. This matters because harsh self-judgment creates another attempt at control. You attack yourself in the hope that if you punish yourself enough, you will never make another mistake. But fear does not guarantee wisdom. Often it creates hesitation and confusion. A calmer mind learns more clearly. There is also another reason outcomes become painful. We often decide in advance what a successful life should look like. Success should mean a certain career, a certain income, a certain home, a certain family, a certain age by which everything should happen. Then when life follows another path, we call it failure. But sometimes what you call failure is simply a different road. This does not mean every failure secretly leads to something wonderful. That idea can become another form of denial. Some opportunities are genuinely lost. Some relationships truly end. Some dreams do not happen. But not every closed path means the entire journey is ruined. You may lose one future without losing the possibility of a meaningful life. That distinction is important. The mind often turns one failed outcome into the failure of the whole future. A person loses a job and thinks, my career is over. A marriage ends and they think, I will be alone forever. A business closes and they think, I will never recover. The present pain reaches into the future and writes a story without evidence. This is another form of control. The mind wants to know what the failure means, so it decides quickly. This is the end. But you do not know that. Failure tells you what happened. It does not always tell you what happens next. There is humility in allowing the future to remain unwritten. You can say, this did not work, and I do not yet know what comes from it. That sentence contains both truth and openness. It does not force hope. It does not force despair. It simply leaves room. That room is important because many people respond to failure by trying to regain control immediately. They make a sudden decision. They rush into another relationship. They start another project before understanding the last one. They make promises to themselves. I will never trust anyone again. I will never take that kind of risk. I will never depend on anybody. These promises feel strong because pain wants protection, but a decision made in fresh pain can become a prison later. Maybe the lesson is not never trust. Maybe the lesson is trust more slowly. Maybe the lesson is not never take risks. Maybe it is understand the risk better. Maybe the lesson is not never love again. Maybe it is do not abandon yourself inside love. Failure should make you wiser, not smaller. This requires patience. You do not always need to decide immediately what a painful event means. Let the emotions settle. Let time reveal more. Buddhist teachings place great value on observing without immediate reaction. Something happens, the mind reacts. Then you watch. What feelings are present? What stories are appearing? What urge is rising? Maybe you want to run. Maybe you want to prove something. Maybe you want revenge. Maybe you want to succeed quickly just so everyone can see that you are still strong. These reactions are understandable, but they are not always wise. When you are attached to outcomes, failure can create a powerful need to prove yourself. This is especially true when other people know about the failure. You may feel embarrassed. You may worry about what they think. Suddenly, your next decision is not about what is right for you. It is about repairing your image. You want people to see that you are still successful, still desirable, still intelligent, still capable. This can push you into choices you do not actually want. You may stay in a bad situation because leaving would look like failure. You may continue a project that is clearly not working because stopping would feel embarrassing. You may hold on to a relationship because you do not want people to know it ended. This is how attachment to outcome becomes attachment to appearance. You are no longer asking, what is wise? You are asking, how do I make this look successful? Buddhist practice cuts through this by asking you to see the truth without decoration. If something is over, it is over. If something is not working, see that. If a plan needs to change, change it. There is no shame in responding to reality. Sometimes changing direction is more courageous than continuing, but the controlling mind often confuses persistence with virtue. It says, I must make this work because I already invested so much. This can lead to years of unnecessary suffering. You invested time, you invested money, you invested emotion, so now you feel that stopping would waste everything. But what has already been spent cannot be recovered by spending more. Sometimes the lesson is complete. Sometimes walking away is not failure. It is recognition. Buddhist wisdom teaches the importance of non-attachment, and this includes non-attachment to past investment. You can honor the effort without remaining trapped by it. You can say, I gave this everything I could, and it is time to release it. There is dignity in that. The need to control outcomes can also damage the process itself. You become so focused on winning that you stop learning. You become so focused on being chosen that you stop asking whether you even want what is choosing you. You become so focused on reaching the goal that you stop noticing what the journey is doing to you. This happens in work. A person wants a promotion. They begin working longer hours. They ignore health. They become impatient with family. They sacrifice rest. The promotion becomes the proof that all of this was worth it. Then someone else gets the position. Now the disappointment is enormous because the person sacrificed so much for a result they believed had to happen. But perhaps there was a warning long before the final result. The process itself was already creating suffering. This is why it is important to ask not only, will I get what I want? Ask, who am I becoming while I pursue it? That question changes everything. A goal that makes you dishonest, cruel, constantly anxious, or completely disconnected from life may not be worth the price, even if you succeed. Buddhist teachings place intention and conduct before external reward. How you travel matters. If you reach success through constant inner suffering, the success may not bring the peace you expected. And if the result fails, at least a wise process can still leave you stronger. Maybe you learned discipline. Maybe you learned patience. Maybe you discovered a skill. Maybe you discovered what you do not want. Maybe you developed courage. These things are not consolation prizes. They are part of the real value of effort. The controlling mind sees only two categories: success or failure. But life is more complicated. A project can fail financially and still teach you something that changes your future. A relationship can end and still reveal parts of yourself you needed to understand. A rejected application can redirect you toward work that fits you better. Again, this does not mean every painful outcome should be turned into a positive story. You do not have to make everything beautiful. You only need to remain open enough to learn. That openness is very different from control. Control decides what the experience must mean. Awareness waits and watches. Another source of suffering is comparing outcomes. You work hard and someone else succeeds faster. You sacrifice for years while another person seems to receive opportunities easily. You ask, why them? Comparison makes failure feel more personal. It is no longer simply, my plan did not work. Now it becomes, their plan worked, so something must be wrong with me. But you do not know all the causes behind another person's life. You see the result. You do not see every advantage, every struggle, every hidden condition, every sacrifice. Comparing outcomes without comparing causes creates false conclusions. Buddhist teaching encourages you to return to your own path. What can you learn? What can you improve? What is the next wise action? Another person's success does not reduce your possibility. Their timeline is not a judgment on yours. This matters especially because failure can create jealousy. You may feel ashamed of that jealousy, but emotions do not need shame. Notice them. Part of me wishes I had what they have. That honesty is healthier than pretending. Then look deeper. What does their success represent to you? Security, respect, freedom, love. Maybe the jealousy is pointing toward a desire you need to. Understand. Use the emotion as information rather than letting it become bitterness. This is Buddhist awareness in practice. You do not need to become the emotion. You observe it. Failure also hurts more when you believe life owes you a fair exchange. I was good, so good things should happen. I worked hard, so I should succeed. I stayed loyal, so they should stay. This expectation is understandable because fairness feels natural, but life does not operate as a simple reward system. Good actions have value, but not every result arrives immediately or in the form you expect. If you are kind only because kindness must guarantee kindness in return, your kindness becomes another attempt at control. If you work hard only because work must guarantee success, you may become bitter when conditions change. Buddhist ethics offer another reason to act well. You act wisely because wise action shapes your mind. Honesty matters even when someone else lies. Compassion matters even when it is not rewarded. Discipline matters even when the result is uncertain. These qualities become part of who you are. That cannot be taken away by one failed outcome. This is a deeper form of success. External results are unstable. Character is trained through repeated choices. If you know you acted with integrity, you can still grieve the result without losing respect for yourself. This creates resilience. You can say, I wanted a different outcome, but I am proud of how I handled myself. That sentence protects something important. It separates the result from your values. You do not control whether someone chooses you, but you control whether you betray yourself trying to be chosen. You do not control whether a business succeeds, but you control whether you act honestly. You do not control whether people appreciate your work, but you control the care you put into it. This is where effort becomes peaceful. You focus on what belongs to you. The rest is released. There is a Buddhist quality of equanimity that becomes especially valuable here. Equanimity does not mean you stop caring whether things go well or badly. It means you do not allow either success or failure to completely overthrow the mind. When good news comes, you enjoy it without believing it will last forever. When bad news comes, you feel it without believing it defines everything. You remain human, but you become less easily thrown from one extreme to another. This is strength. Many people believe strength means never failing, but strength is often revealed after failure. Can you remain kind after disappointment? Can you remain honest after losing? Can you begin again without hatred? Can you learn without destroying yourself with blame? Can you let the experience change you without allowing it to harden you? These questions matter more than whether you can force every outcome in your favor. There is also wisdom in preparing for failure without expecting failure. This sounds contradictory, but it is not. You can ask, if this does not work, what will I do? That is healthy. It gives you flexibility. But the controlling mind asks something different. How do I guarantee that this cannot fail? That guarantee rarely exists. A flexible person prepares alternative paths. A controlling person tries to eliminate the possibility of another path. This distinction reduces fear. If you know you have options, one outcome does not carry the entire weight of your future. If the job does not happen, you have another direction. If the plan changes, you can adjust. If the relationship ends, you know life can continue. This does not remove pain. It removes the feeling that one result determines everything. That is important. Failure becomes unbearable when you make the outcome too large. This must work. This is my only chance. I cannot survive if this fails. Sometimes these statements are emotionally understandable, but they may not be true. The mind speaks in absolutes when it is afraid. Buddhist awareness asks you to look carefully. Is this truly the only possible path? Or is it simply the path you became attached to? Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from realizing that your future is wider than one result. You wanted one door. It closed. That hurts. But a closed door is not proof that every door is closed. You may not see another one yet. That does not mean it does not exist. You do not need false optimism. You only need to stop declaring the whole future finished because one outcome failed. Another important practice is learning to define success before you begin. Not only external success, inner success. Suppose you are going into a difficult conversation. External success might be getting the other person to agree, but that depends partly on them. Inner success might be speaking honestly, calmly, and respectfully. That belongs more to you. Suppose you apply for a job. External success is getting hired. Inner success may be preparing well, presenting yourself clearly, and learning from the experience. Suppose you start a business. External success may be profit. Inner success may include discipline, wise decisions, honest conduct, and adapting when information changes. This does not replace the external goal. It gives you something stable to stand on while pursuing it. Then failure does not take everything. Maybe you did not get the result, but perhaps you still acted well. This creates a healthier relationship with effort. You can pursue goals seriously without becoming owned by them. And when disappointment comes, you can ask better questions. Not, why am I such a failure? But, what actually happened? What was within my influence? What was outside it? What can I learn? What should I release? Is there a next step? These questions move the mind toward wisdom. They do not feed shame. The need to control outcomes also makes people afraid of starting things they cannot guarantee. This is one of the saddest consequences. You may have a dream but never begin because success is uncertain. You may want to speak honestly but stay silent because you cannot control the response. You may want to create something but delay because people may not like it. You may want to love again but refuse because relationships can end. The attempt to avoid failure becomes a failure to fully live. This is why non-attachment is not passive. It can make you braver. When you no longer demand guaranteed success, you become willing to try. You can say, "This may work, it may not, but I believe the action is worth taking." That is courage. Courage does not require certainty. It acts without it. There is freedom in giving effort without demanding a promise. You become more creative, more flexible, less afraid of mistakes. You respond to feedback instead of taking feedback as a personal attack. You become easier to teach because correction no longer threatens your identity. Failure becomes information. This does not mean you enjoy it. It means you can use it. Think about how differently two people can respond to the same result. Both fail at something important. One person says, "This proves I am worthless." They withdraw. They become bitter. They stop trying. The other says, "This hurts. I need time, but there is something here for me to understand." They grieve. They rest. Then they look again. The event is similar. The relationship with the event is different. That relationship determines much of the suffering that follows. Buddhist teachings are deeply concerned with this relationship. We cannot command every experience, but we can train the way the mind meets experience. That is the difference between pain that moves through you and pain that becomes part of your identity. One moves, the other is held, and eventually you may reach a point where you can look at failure without immediately calling it failure. You may simply say, "This is an outcome I did not want." That language creates space. Maybe it truly is a loss. Maybe it is a lesson. Maybe it is a redirection. Maybe its meaning will become clear later. You do not need to decide today. The controlling mind wants the event judged immediately, good or bad, success or failure, right or wrong. But reality can be more complicated. Some of the things you once desperately wanted may later become things you are grateful you did not receive. Some failures reveal hidden truths. A rejected opportunity may reveal that you were chasing approval. A relationship ending may show how much of yourself you had abandoned. A failed plan may reveal that you were following someone else's idea of success. Again, not every failure becomes a gift, but every failure can become a place of awareness if you are willing to look honestly. What did you attach your identity to? What did you believe the outcome would prove? What did you fear it would say about you if it failed? These questions can reveal the deeper source of the pain. Maybe you did not only want the promotion, you wanted proof that you mattered. Maybe you did not only want the relationship, you wanted proof that you were lovable. Maybe you did not only want the money, you wanted to feel safe. Now you can begin working with the deeper need instead of demanding that one outcome solve it. This is powerful because external success cannot permanently heal every inner wound. You may achieve something and still feel insecure. You may be praised and still fear criticism. You may be loved and still fear abandonment. If you expect outcomes to permanently repair your inner world, you will keep chasing new outcomes. Buddhist practice turns attention inward. Can you recognize your worth before the applause? Can you cultivate steadiness before certainty? Can you treat yourself with compassion before somebody chooses you? This does not make external goals meaningless. It makes you less dependent on them. Then success becomes something you can enjoy instead of something you desperately need. And failure becomes something you can survive instead of something that destroys your identity. This is where letting go becomes practical. Letting go of an outcome does not mean you stop trying. It means you do everything reasonably available to you. Then you stop pretending that worry can control the rest. You prepare for the interview. Then you attend. You speak honestly in the conversation. Then you allow the other person to respond. You build the project carefully. Then you release it into a world you cannot fully command. There is a moment in every effort where action ends and waiting begins. The controlling mind suffers greatly in that space, but the peaceful mind can say, "I have done what I can." These may be some of the most difficult words to believe. I have done what I can. Not, I have guaranteed the outcome. Not, everything will happen exactly as I want. Simply, I have done what I can. Then you breathe. You let reality answer. If the answer is what you hoped for, receive it with gratitude. If it is not, feel the disappointment without turning it into a sentence about your entire life. Learn what can be learned. Adjust what can be adjusted. Release what cannot be changed. Then move when it is time to move. This is how failure becomes lighter, not painless. Lighter. Because you are no longer carrying the outcome and the attack on yourself at the same time. You stop saying, "This should never have happened." You start saying, "This happened. Now, what is the wisest way to meet it?" That question brings you back into the present. It brings you back to your own actions. It brings you back to the part of life where choice still exists. And once you begin loosening your grip on outcomes, another uncomfortable truth appears. Sometimes the mind does not suffer because something failed. Sometimes it suffers simply because it cannot get an answer. There are situations where no amount of effort can give immediate clarity, no explanation arrives, and no final conclusion is available. The controlling mind finds this almost unbearable. It wants every question finished, every mystery solved, every uncertainty closed. But Buddhist wisdom offers a very different lesson. Sometimes peace begins when you allow a question to remain unanswered. And this is where the mind meets one of the hardest forms of uncertainty. Sometimes there is no failed plan to fix, no clear mistake to correct, and no outcome you can improve through more effort. Sometimes there is simply a question with no answer. Why did this person change? Why did this relationship end? Why did this happen now? What would have happened if you had chosen differently? The controlling mind hates these empty spaces. It keeps digging because it believes peace is hiding behind one final explanation. But Buddhist wisdom offers a surprising lesson. Not every question needs to be answered before your heart can become still. There are moments in life when the mind becomes trapped by a question. You wake up thinking about it. You carry it through the day. You return to it while eating, walking, resting, or trying to sleep. You examine the same memory from another angle. You replay the same conversation. You search for hidden meaning in someone's words. You ask yourself what you missed. You wonder what they really meant. You try to build a complete explanation from incomplete information, and the mind keeps saying, "If I can just understand this, I will finally be able to move on." Sometimes understanding does help. There are questions with useful answers. If you made a mistake, understanding it can help you grow. If a relationship broke down because of poor communication, learning what happened can make future relationships healthier. If a decision produced a bad result, examining the causes can improve your judgment. But there is another kind of questioning that does not create wisdom. It creates a circle. You ask the same thing repeatedly, but no new information appears. You do not become clearer, you become more tired. The question has stopped being a path toward understanding and has become a way of refusing uncertainty. This is where Buddhist teachings become deeply practical. The Buddha did not encourage endless thinking about every mystery. He repeatedly directed attention toward questions that reduce suffering and toward actions that can actually be practiced. This matters because the human mind can become fascinated by questions that have no useful ending. Why exactly did someone stop loving me? What did they think during the final week? Did they ever truly care? What would my life look like if I had taken the other job? Would my marriage have survived if I had said something different? What would have happened if I had left earlier? There may never be a complete answer. Even if the other person explains themselves, their explanation may not satisfy you. People do not always fully understand their own motives. Memory changes. Emotions are complicated. A decision can grow from many small causes instead of one clear reason. This is why demanding a perfect explanation from human life can become another form of control. You want the story to make sense. You want a beginning, a cause, and a conclusion. You want to be able to point somewhere and say, that is why it happened. But life is often messier than that. Sometimes several things were true at once. Someone loved you and still left. Someone cared about you and still hurt you. Someone had good intentions and still made a harmful choice. You made the best decision you could and still regretted part of it later. A situation was unfair, and there was still something for you to learn from it. The controlling mind wants simple answers. Reality often gives mixed ones. This is difficult because uncertainty can feel emotionally unfinished. The mind likes closed loops. When something begins, it wants an ending. When someone hurts you, it wants an explanation. When something disappears, it wants to know why. Without that answer, part of the mind may keep returning to the event. It is as though the experience remains open. This is why people often talk about needing closure. But closure is sometimes misunderstood. You may believe closure means receiving the explanation you want from the person who created the confusion. You imagine that one conversation will finally make everything clear, one apology, one confession, one final answer. And sometimes that happens, but often it does not. Sometimes the other person refuses to speak. Sometimes they give an answer that creates more questions. Sometimes their explanation feels dishonest. Sometimes they say something painful that you wish you had never heard. Sometimes there is no one left to ask. What happens then? Do you remain trapped forever because the person who confused you did not give you the explanation you wanted? Buddhist wisdom points toward another kind of closure. Closure can be something you create by accepting that the full story may never become available. This is not the closure of certainty. It is the closure of surrender. You say, there are parts of this I may never understand. At first, that can feel unsatisfying. The mind may resist immediately. No, I need to know. But ask yourself what exactly knowing would change. Would the answer bring the relationship back? Would it undo the betrayal? Would it return the lost years? Would it change the decision that has already been made? Sometimes the answer may help you learn something important, but sometimes the question is only keeping your attention tied to a door that has already closed. There is a Buddhist lesson in knowing when a question has completed its useful work. You have reflected. You have learned what is available. You have recognized your part. You have recognized what belonged to the other person. At some point, continuing to question no longer creates insight. It only continues the attachment. The mind may call this thinking, but it is often clinging to explanation, clinging to the past, clinging to the belief that peace cannot begin until everything makes sense. This is a dangerous belief because many parts of life never make complete sense. Think about loss. Someone you love dies suddenly. The mind may ask, why now? Perhaps there is a medical explanation. Perhaps there is a physical cause. But the emotional question is usually deeper. Why did this have to happen? There may be no answer that satisfies the heart. You can understand the cause of death and still not understand why life had to unfold this way. This is where intellectual answers reach their limit. The heart is asking for meaning, and meaning does not always arrive immediately. Sometimes grief has to be lived before it can be understood. Sometimes it is never fully understood. Buddhism does not demand that you create a comforting explanation for every loss. It allows you to sit beside not knowing. That may sound simple, but it takes great courage. Human beings often prefer a painful answer to no answer at all. This is why the mind sometimes invents explanations. Someone becomes distant and you decide, they must hate me. You do not know that. But certainty, even painful certainty, can feel easier than uncertainty. You would rather believe something terrible than admit, I do not know what is happening. This is one of the strange ways control works. The mind creates a story because a story feels more manageable than an empty space. But false certainty can create unnecessary suffering. You may become angry at someone for a motive they never had. You may blame yourself for something you did not cause. You may destroy your confidence because you created an explanation without evidence. I was not good enough. Maybe that was not why they left. I ruined everything. Maybe you did not. They never cared. Maybe they did care and still could not continue. The truth may be more complicated than the mind wants. This is why saying, I do not know, can be an act of wisdom, not weakness, wisdom. I do not know why they changed. I do not know what they truly felt. I do not know what would have happened if I chose differently. I do not know what the future will make of this. These sentences protect you from turning uncertainty into false conclusions. The ego often dislikes them because the ego wants to feel certain. It wants to understand. It wants to name. It wants to be right. But Buddhist practice slowly teaches you that not knowing does not make you powerless. You can still live wisely without having every answer. You can make a decision based on what is visible. You can set a boundary based on behavior. You can walk away from repeated harm without understanding every cause behind it. You can forgive without knowing exactly why someone hurt you. You can continue living without knowing what might have happened on another path. This is freedom from the demand for complete explanation. There is a useful difference between information you need and information you simply want. You may need to know whether someone is willing to continue a relationship. You do not necessarily need to know every private thought they had while making the decision. You may need to know what a doctor recommends next. You may not be able to know exactly how your health will look 10 years from now. You may need to know whether a financial choice is affordable. You cannot know every economic condition that will exist years ahead. Wisdom asks for enough information to act well. Control asks for enough information to remove all uncertainty. The second amount does not exist. This is why the search becomes endless. You ask one question, the answer creates another, then another. Eventually, you realize that certainty is moving away as quickly as you approach it. Buddhist practice offers another direction. Instead of asking, how can I know everything I need to feel safe? You begin asking, can I remain steady even while something remains unknown? That is a much deeper form of security. It does not depend on the world explaining itself. There is also a danger in demanding answers too quickly. Some truths need time. A person may not yet understand their own feelings. A situation may still be changing. New information may arrive later. If you force an answer before it is ready, you may receive something incomplete or dishonest simply because everyone wants the pressure to stop. This happens often in relationships. Someone says, "Tell me exactly what you feel right now." The other person may genuinely not know, but "I don't know" feels unacceptable. So they give an answer. Then later, their feelings change or become clearer. Now the first answer becomes another source of conflict. Sometimes patience is more truthful than certainty. You can allow someone to say, "I need time." You can allow yourself to say it too. Not every question deserves an immediate conclusion. This is especially important when emotions are strong. When you are angry, frightened, hurt, or deeply disappointed, the mind wants fast meaning. It asks, "What does this prove?" This proves they do not respect me. This proves I chose the wrong person. This proves everything is ruined. But strong emotion narrows perception. It makes one interpretation feel like the only interpretation. Buddhist mindfulness teaches you to let emotion settle before turning it into a permanent conclusion. You can say, "This hurts. I will understand more later." That sentence creates space. You are not denying the pain. You are simply refusing to turn pain into a complete philosophy of your life. There is great wisdom in delaying interpretation. Some experiences look one way while they are happening and completely different years later. A rejection that once felt humiliating may later look like a necessary redirection. A friendship you were desperate to save may later reveal itself as something you had outgrown. A painful mistake may later become the reason you developed better judgment. Again, this does not mean every bad event becomes good. It means your understanding changes. So why demand a final meaning while you are still standing in the middle of the experience? Sometimes you are too close to see clearly. This is another reason some questions should remain open for a while. Open does not mean forgotten. It means you are not forcing an answer. You allow life to add information. This is similar to watching muddy water. If you keep stirring it to see whether it has become clear, you keep the mud moving. Leave it alone. Clarity may settle naturally. The mind works like this too. You can think about a problem so much that your own thinking becomes part of the confusion. At that point, more analysis is not always more wisdom. Sometimes what is needed is silence. Walk, breathe, sleep. Do ordinary things. Let the mind stop touching the question. You may discover that when you return later, something has softened. Maybe the answer appears. Maybe you realize you no longer need it. That second possibility is often overlooked. We assume peace comes when the question is answered. Sometimes peace comes when the question loses its importance. You stop caring exactly why the person behaved that way. You know enough. They hurt you repeatedly. You responded. You learned. You moved on. The full psychological explanation is no longer necessary. This is a sign of healing, not because the past became clear, but because your life became larger than the question. The question once filled your entire mind. Now it occupies a smaller space. Eventually, it may become something you remember without feeling pulled back inside it. This is what letting go often looks like. Not forgetting, not approving, not pretending. Simply no longer needing the past to explain itself before you permit the present to continue. There is also a Buddhist warning against becoming trapped in questions that do not help reduce suffering. You can spend years asking huge questions in ways that leave you no wiser. Why is life unfair? There are philosophical ways to explore fairness. But if you are asking because you want life to guarantee that good people never suffer, you may never receive the answer you want. Good people experience illness. Kind people are betrayed. Careful people face accidents. Generous people can still experience loss. The question, why, may be natural, but sometimes another question becomes more useful. What now? This is one of the most powerful changes you can make. Not every time. There are moments when understanding causes is important, but after understanding has reached its limit, what now returns you to life? What now? How do I care for myself now? What needs to be accepted now? What can I learn now? What needs to end? What deserves another chance? What is the next compassionate action? The question does not erase what happened. It gives you somewhere to place your feet. The mind trapped in why can remain in yesterday for years. What now brings you into this moment? There is another difficult kind of unanswered question. Questions about another person's inner world. What do they think of me? Do they regret what they did? Do they miss me? Are they happier without me? You may never know. And yet people can spend enormous amounts of emotional energy trying to answer these questions indirectly. They watch social media, they interpret photographs, they ask mutual friends, they examine small changes, they search for signs. The mind believes this information will bring relief. Often it does the opposite. You see something unclear and create a new theory. Now another question appears. This is another form of attachment. Your attention is still living inside another person's mind. You have given your peace to something you cannot directly access. Buddhist awareness asks you to return. What is happening in your mind? Why does their private thought matter so much? Perhaps you want proof that you mattered. Perhaps you want them to regret losing you. Perhaps you want evidence that justice has happened. These are very human desires. But do you want your healing to depend on them? If they never regret it, will you stay wounded forever? If they are happy, does that erase your value? If they forget you, does that make what you experienced unreal? No. Your life does not need another person's continuing attention to remain meaningful. Sometimes leaving a question unanswered is how you take your attention back. You say, maybe they miss me, maybe they don't. I will not build my day around finding out. That is freedom. The same wisdom applies to regret. Regret often creates impossible questions. What if I had taken the other path? This can become endless. Because there is no way to test the answer, you compare your real life with an imagined life. But the imagined life has an unfair advantage. It contains only the possibilities you choose to see. You imagine the career you did not take, but not the problems that career might have brought. You imagine the person you did not marry, but not the conflicts you might have had. You imagine the city you did not move to, but not the loneliness or difficulties that might have waited there. The mind creates a perfect alternative because reality cannot argue back. This is why what-if questions can become so painful. There is no final answer. You can learn from the decision, but you cannot live both roads. Every choice closes some possibilities. That is part of being human. Buddhist non-attachment includes releasing the lives you did not live, not because they were worthless possibilities, but because you are not living them now. You are here. This is the path that exists beneath your feet. If you spend your entire life looking at the road not taken, you may fail to walk the one you have. There is sadness in accepting this, but also peace. You stop asking the impossible question, which life would have been perfect? There is no answer. No path is free from change, loss, difficulty, and uncertainty. Instead, ask, how can I live this path wisely from here? That is a question you can answer. There are also unanswered questions about justice. You may watch someone harm others and seem to face no consequences. You may ask, why are they allowed to get away with it? You may see dishonest people succeed. You may see kind people struggle. The mind wants the world to balance immediately. When it does not, anger grows. Buddhist teachings about karma are often misunderstood as a simple system where every action receives an obvious reward or punishment right away. Life is not that simple. Countless conditions are interacting. You cannot always see the full result of another person's choices. More importantly, waiting for the universe to punish someone can keep you emotionally tied to them. You check whether they failed. You hope their new relationship ends. You hope people discover what they did. You believe you will feel free when justice becomes visible. But what if it never becomes visible to you? Will you remain tied to them forever? Your healing cannot depend completely on watching someone else suffer. There may be legal or practical forms of justice that should absolutely be pursued when appropriate, but inwardly there is another task. You stop requiring their downfall to prove that your pain mattered. What happened mattered because it happened. You do not need their future suffering to validate your past. This is a difficult but powerful release. Some unanswered questions are about yourself. Why am I still affected by this? Why am I not over it yet? Why do I keep feeling this way? These questions can sound helpful, but they sometimes hide impatience. You want healing to follow a schedule. You think that because enough time has passed, sadness should be gone. But healing does not always move in a straight line. You can feel peaceful for weeks, and then one memory returns. That does not mean you have failed. It means the mind has many layers. Instead of demanding an explanation for every emotion, sometimes simply notice it. Sadness is here today. You do not need to ask immediately why. Maybe the reason will become obvious. Maybe it will pass. Buddhist mindfulness allows an experience to exist without turning everything into a problem. This is important because constant self-analysis can become another way of refusing to feel. You keep asking why you are sad instead of simply allowing sadness. You keep trying to understand anxiety instead of feeling the body and letting the wave pass. Understanding matters, but not every emotion requires a full investigation. Sometimes a feeling is just moving through. Give it space. This is where silence becomes an important teacher. Modern life gives us very little silence. The moment a question appears, we search. We ask someone. We watch a video. We read opinions. We look for explanations. We can spend hours collecting answers from people who do not know our situation. And the more answers we collect, the more confused we become. One person says they left because they were afraid. Another says they never cared. Another says you were too available. Another says you should have tried harder. Now the original uncertainty has become 20 different theories. Sometimes wisdom means turning off the noise. You do not need an opinion from everyone. Not every painful event needs a label. Not every relationship needs a final diagnosis. You can know enough from what happened. This is especially valuable when people try to explain others using simple categories. He did this because he is this type of person. She behaved that way because she must have this problem. Labels can create temporary certainty, but human beings are more complicated than labels. A label may explain part of a pattern, but it cannot reveal an entire person. Buddhist practice encourages direct observation. What behavior happened? How often? What effect did it have? What response protects well-being? These questions are grounded. You do not need to solve the mystery of someone's entire personality before deciding what is healthy for you. This reduces unnecessary mental work. You may never know why someone repeatedly lies, but you know they repeatedly lie. That may be enough information to change how much you trust them. You may never know why someone keeps disappearing, but you know they are inconsistent. You do not need the perfect explanation to recognize the pattern. Leaving questions unanswered does not mean ignoring evidence. It means knowing when evidence is sufficient. That is a form of wisdom. There is also humility in accepting that some answers are beyond your current understanding. Maybe something happened that you cannot make sense of now. Instead of forcing meaning, you can say, "I do not understand this yet." Notice the word "yet." It leaves the door open without demanding that an answer come. Maybe years later you understand. Maybe you never do. Both possibilities can be accepted. The controlling mind says, I must know. The wiser mind says, if understanding comes, I will receive it. Until then, I will continue living. This changes your relationship with mystery. Mystery stops being an enemy. You begin recognizing that life has always contained things you cannot explain. Why did you meet certain people at the exact time you did? Why did one opportunity disappear while another appeared unexpectedly? Why does one memory stay vivid while another fades? Not everything has to be turned into a clear story. Some things can remain mysterious. There is beauty in that too. Control wants life to become a solved problem. Buddhism invites you to experience life more like a river. You can learn its movement. You can understand many causes, but you cannot hold every drop still and examine it before allowing it to continue. Life moves. Your task is not to stop the river until every question is answered. Your task is to learn how to move with awareness. This is why meditation can be so useful when questions become obsessive. Sit quietly, let the question appear. Do not answer it, just notice it. Why did they do that? There is the thought. Then notice what comes with it. Tightness, sadness, anger, an urge to replay the memory. Stay with the physical experience instead of entering the story again. Breathe. The question may return. Let it return. You do not need to push it away, but you do not need to follow it either. This teaches you something very important. A question can exist in the mind without controlling the mind. You do not have to solve every thought that appears. Eventually, you may feel the emotional charge weaken. The question is still there, but it no longer has the same power. This is not because you answered it. It is because you stopped feeding it. That is a different kind of resolution. Sometimes the greatest answer is discovering that you can live without one. You realize you can still laugh, still work, still love, still sleep, still grow. The missing explanation did not destroy your life. It only felt as though it would, because your mind made certainty a condition for peace. Now that condition begins to loosen, and once it loosens, you begin to understand something deeper. Not knowing is part of being alive. You do not know how long every relationship will last. You do not know which plans will succeed. You do not know exactly how people see you. You do not know what every past choice would have produced. You do not know what tomorrow will bring, and yet you can still live fully. This is not a failure of knowledge. It is the human condition. The Buddhist path does not remove every mystery. It trains a mind that can remain peaceful beside mystery. That is far more powerful than collecting endless answers. So the next time the mind refuses to release a question, look carefully at what kind of question it is. Is there useful information you can reasonably obtain? If so, seek it. Is there a lesson available? Learn it. Is there a conversation that would genuinely help? Have it. But if you have reached the edge of what can be known, notice that too. You do not have to keep digging simply because the ground feels unfinished. You can say, I know enough to continue. That may be one of the most peaceful sentences you ever learn. I know enough to continue. Not everything. Enough. Enough to make the next decision. Enough to protect yourself. Enough to forgive. Enough to stop waiting. Enough to return to your own life. And sometimes even that much is not available. Then you can say, I do not know, and I will continue anyway. That is a profound form of trust. Not trust that every answer will eventually appear. Trust that your life does not have to stop while you wait. This is how unanswered questions lose their power. You stop treating them like locked doors you must open before moving forward. You realize there may be another path around them. You can carry a little uncertainty without letting it become your whole identity. You can remember something without solving it. You can miss someone without knowing exactly why they left. You can regret something without knowing what the alternative would have been. You can grieve without understanding why life was unfair. You can continue. And perhaps this is one of the quietest forms of Buddhist freedom, the ability to bow before mystery without feeling defeated by it. You stop demanding that life explain itself on your schedule. You stop questioning every silence until it becomes another wound. You stop believing that uncertainty is proof that something is wrong. Sometimes the answer is simply not available. Sometimes it is not needed. Sometimes the question itself is what you are being asked to release. And when you begin releasing the need to know everything, you may notice another demand hiding close behind it. The mind does not only want answers about what happened, it also wants control over how other people see you. It wants to know what they think, what they say when you are not there, whether they respect you, whether they approve of your choices. Before long, you may find yourself managing not only your actions, but your entire image in the minds of others. And that search for approval can become another prison. And this is where the need for answers quietly turns into another kind of control. When you stop trying to solve every mystery, the mind often reaches for something else it believes it can manage: how other people see you. You begin watching your words, your choices, your appearance, your success, even your silence, because somewhere inside you is the fear that if people misunderstand you, judge you, criticize you, or speak badly about you, something important will be lost. But the more energy you spend trying to control your reputation, the less freedom you have to simply live. At first, caring about your reputation does not seem like a problem. In fact, some concern for reputation can be useful. You want people to know you are honest. You want your family to trust you. You want your work to reflect your character. You want your words to have weight. There is nothing wrong with living in a way that earns respect. The suffering begins when respect turns into something you must constantly protect. Then your life starts becoming a performance. You do not simply ask, "Is this the right thing to do?" You begin asking, "What will people think if I do this?" You do not simply ask, "Is this true for me?" You ask, "Will people approve?" You do not simply make a decision. You first picture the reactions. Who will support you? Who will criticize you? Who might talk about you? Who might misunderstand? And slowly, your own life becomes crowded with invisible spectators. Even when nobody is physically watching, you feel watched. That is how the prison begins. The walls are not made of stone. They are made of imagined opinions. Buddhist teachings speak deeply about attachment, and reputation is one of the easiest things to become attached to because it feels connected to who you are. If someone criticizes your house, you may feel annoyed. If someone criticizes your identity, your intelligence, your parenting, your character, or your way of life, the pain can feel much sharper. Why? Because the mind says, "They are not simply disagreeing with something I did, they are attacking me." Then the instinct to defend begins. You want to explain, you want to prove, you want to correct their view. You want to tell your side of the story. Sometimes this is appropriate. False accusations can cause real harm. Misunderstandings can need clarification. But many people continue defending themselves long after there is anything useful left to defend. They explain themselves to people who have already decided what to believe. They repeat the same story. They collect evidence. They ask friends, "You know I am not like that, right?" They become obsessed with changing somebody else's opinion. This is exhausting because another person's mind is not yours to operate. You can offer truth. You cannot force belief. You can explain your intention. You cannot control how someone interprets it. You can behave with integrity. You cannot make every person recognize that integrity. The moment you forget this, reputation becomes a trap. Think about how many different versions of you exist in the minds of other people. One person sees you as kind. Another thinks you are too quiet. Someone else thinks you talk too much. One person admires your confidence. Another calls the same confidence arrogance. Someone thinks you are generous. Another remembers the one time you said no. Someone thinks you are brave. Another believes you are reckless. Which version are you going to control? There is no single reputation because every person looks at you through their own history, preferences, wounds, values, expectations, and experiences. Even two people can watch you do the exact same thing and reach completely different conclusions. You speak firmly. One says, that person has strong boundaries. Another says, that person is difficult. You leave a situation that is hurting you. One says, that took courage. Another says, they gave up. You become successful. One person feels inspired. Another thinks you have changed. You become more private. Someone respects your peace. Someone else assumes you are hiding something. If your peace depends on controlling all these interpretations, you will never rest. There are simply too many minds to manage. This is where Buddhist wisdom offers a difficult but liberating truth. Your responsibility is your conduct, not every opinion created from your conduct. That does not mean you ignore feedback. Sometimes criticism contains something valuable. Sometimes someone sees a weakness you have been avoiding. The practice is not to reject every uncomfortable opinion. The practice is to examine it without immediately becoming owned by it. Ask, is there truth here? If there is, learn. If there is not, release. This is much healthier than either extreme. One extreme says, everyone's opinion controls me. The other says, nobody's opinion matters. Both can be unwise. A balanced mind listens without surrendering its center. This matters because reputation can become so important that people start changing their behavior only to avoid judgment. They stay in relationships they no longer want because they fear what others will say. They continue careers they hate because success looks impressive. They spend money they cannot afford because they want to appear comfortable. They say yes when they want to say no because they do not want to look selfish. They hide exhaustion because they want to appear strong. They hide sadness because they want to seem happy. They hide mistakes because they want to appear perfect. Soon, the person others admire may be someone you can barely continue being. That is one of the deepest costs of controlling reputation. You can become separated from yourself. You build an image, then you have to maintain it. Suppose people know you as the strong one. At first this may feel good. Everyone comes to you. Everyone says, you always know what to do. But what happens when you are struggling? You may feel ashamed to ask for help because asking would threaten the image. So you suffer quietly. The reputation that once gave you pride now prevents you from being human. Or perhaps people know you as the successful one. You built a business. You earned respect. You became the person others admire. Then the business struggles. Now the practical problem is difficult enough, but another fear appears. What will people think if they know? So instead of asking for help early, you hide it. You take unnecessary risks. You pretend everything is fine. You make poor decisions because protecting the image becomes more important than facing reality. This is how reputation can become dangerous. It can make truth feel threatening. Buddhist practice values seeing things as they are, not as you wish they were, not as you want others to believe they are, as they are. If you are struggling, see the struggle. If you made a mistake, see the mistake. If you do not know something, admit that you do not know. If a part of your life is changing, Allow it to change. There is enormous freedom in not having to pretend. The ego often fears this freedom. It says, if people see my weakness, I will lose respect. But consider what kind of respect requires you to hide your humanity. If someone only respects you when you never fail, never struggle, never change, and never need help, they do not respect a complete human being. They respect an image, and maintaining that image can cost you your peace. There is another subtle form of reputation control, wanting to be seen as a good person. This sounds harmless. Surely we should want to be good. But wanting to be good and wanting everyone to see you as good are not identical. A person can do kind things because kindness matters. Another person can do the same things while secretly needing praise. From the outside, the actions may look similar. Inside, the second person becomes dependent on recognition. They help someone and feel hurt when nobody notices. They give and wait for appreciation. They support family members and become angry when nobody says thank you. Then goodness becomes another performance. Buddhist teachings on intention are important here. What is happening inside the action? Are you helping because help is needed, or because you need to be seen as helpful? Are you being generous because generosity matters, or because you need people to think you are generous? This does not mean every desire for appreciation is wrong. Human beings naturally want recognition. The problem is dependence. If your goodness disappears when nobody is watching, then reputation may be controlling the action. There is a powerful freedom in doing the right thing even when nobody knows. You help quietly. You speak honestly even when honesty makes you less popular. You refuse something harmful even when people call you difficult. You choose what aligns with your values even when it does not improve your image. This is inner independence. You no longer need the crowd to confirm every choice. The Buddhist path often points toward this kind of independence because the crowd is unstable. The same people who praise you today may criticize you tomorrow. Public opinion changes quickly. You can be admired for one thing and attacked for the same thing later. If your emotional life rises and falls with praise and blame, you become like a leaf in changing wind. Praise lifts you. Criticism destroys you. Then someone else's words have too much power. Buddhist teachings frequently warn against becoming trapped by these changing worldly conditions. Praise comes, blame comes, gain comes, loss comes, approval comes, rejection comes. They move. The problem is not that praise exists. Enjoy kind words. The problem begins when praise becomes necessary, because once praise becomes necessary, criticism becomes terrifying. Then you begin shaping your whole life around avoiding blame. This can make you dishonest. Not always dishonest in obvious ways. Sometimes it is the dishonesty of silence. You agree when you do not agree. You laugh when something hurts. You stay quiet when a boundary is crossed. You let people believe things about you that are not true because correcting them might create conflict. You become easier to approve of, but harder for yourself to recognize. That is a painful trade. Many people wake up one day and realize they have spent years becoming acceptable to others while becoming unfamiliar to themselves. They chose the career everyone respected. They married because it was expected. They stayed near family because leaving would create criticism. They behaved according to tradition even when their heart was pulling in another direction. Then resentment grows. But the resentment is not always toward other people. Sometimes it is toward yourself, because somewhere inside, you know you gave away too many decisions in exchange for approval. This is why controlling reputation can become a prison even when nobody directly forces you. People do not need to lock the door. Fear of judgment can do it. You may have complete physical freedom and still be unable to make one honest choice because you are imagining what everyone will say. Buddhist mindfulness asks you to notice this before reacting. When you are about to make a decision, listen carefully. Whose voice is inside your head? Is it your own understanding, or a collection of people you are trying not to disappoint? Sometimes the voices belong to people who are not even alive anymore. A parent once told you what success should look like. A teacher once made you feel foolish. A relative once criticized your choices. Years later, you are still living according to those voices. This is how reputation becomes connected to conditioning. You may think you are freely choosing, but underneath, you are trying to prove something. Prove you are intelligent, prove you are successful, prove you are respectable, prove you did not waste your life, prove the people who doubted you were wrong. This kind of life can look impressive from the outside and still feel empty inside, because proving yourself is an endless task. Suppose you finally achieve the success you wanted. You think, now they will respect me. Some do. But someone else criticizes you. Now there is another person to prove wrong, then another. There is no final victory because you cannot control the audience. The only way out is to stop performing for an imaginary courtroom. You do not need to present evidence for your existence every day. This does not mean ambition must disappear. You can achieve great things, but there is a difference between building because you love the work and building because you need the work to prove your worth. One brings energy, the other brings pressure. This becomes especially clear when failure appears. If your reputation is tied to always succeeding, one failure feels like public humiliation. You are not only disappointed, you feel exposed. You fear people talking. You fear being seen differently. Sometimes the fear of embarrassment hurts more than the actual failure. This can prevent people from trying again. They say, "What if I fail twice?" Now the audience has entered the decision. Instead of asking, "Is this worth another attempt?" they ask, "How will it look?" This is a poor way to measure a life. Some of the wisest choices look foolish to outsiders at first. Leaving a prestigious job to protect your health may look like failure to someone who only values status. Ending a harmful relationship may look like giving up to someone who does not know what happened privately. Starting over later in life may look strange to people who believe everyone should follow one timeline. You cannot let people who do not carry the consequences of your decisions have complete authority over those decisions. They may talk for a week. You may live with the outcome for years. This is worth remembering. Other people often judge quickly because judgment costs them little. They make one comment, then they continue their day. You may spend 3 nights thinking about what they said. Who is actually carrying the punishment? You are. This is why learning not to chase every opinion is a form of self-protection. Someone thinks you made the wrong choice. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps they are wrong. Look at the decision honestly. If it was unwise, correct what you can. If it was right for you, allow their disagreement to exist. Not every misunderstanding needs to be repaired. This can be extremely difficult for people who have spent years trying to be understood. You explain your childhood. You explain why you left. You explain why you said no. You explain why you need distance. You explain why you changed your mind. You believe that if people know the full story, they will finally approve. But some people can know the full story and still disagree. What then? Will you explain again? At some point, explanation becomes another attempt to control perception. Buddhist wisdom teaches you to recognize the point where clear communication ends and attachment begins. You told the truth. You spoke respectfully. They still see it differently. Now there is nothing left to force. You can allow the difference. This can feel uncomfortable, especially if you were raised to believe misunderstanding is dangerous. Some people learned early that being misunderstood led to punishment. They had to explain themselves perfectly to stay safe. Maybe a parent assumed the worst. Maybe mistakes were treated harshly. Maybe they had to defend every action. Later, as adults, they continue explaining automatically. They send long messages. They over-clarify simple choices. They become nervous when someone seems disappointed. They feel they must make everyone understand. But adulthood may require learning a new lesson. You do not have to defend every choice to every person. Some people are allowed to misunderstand you. This sentence can feel almost shocking at first. Some people are allowed to misunderstand you, not because truth does not matter, because your peace matters too. If the misunderstanding affects something important, address it. If it damages a meaningful relationship, communicate. If it harms your work or safety, respond wisely. But if someone simply holds an opinion you dislike, you may not need to enter the battle. There is great peace in leaving certain opinions alone. You do not need to attend every argument you are invited to. Reputation control also appears strongly in family systems. Families often carry fixed roles: the responsible one, the difficult one, the successful one, the quiet one, the rebellious one, the peacemaker. Once a role is assigned, changing can create resistance. Suppose you have always been the person who says yes, then you begin setting boundaries. Family members may say, "You have changed." They are correct, you have changed, but the phrase may be spoken as though change itself is betrayal. Now you face a choice. Return to the old role so everybody feels comfortable, or tolerate their discomfort while becoming healthier. This is one reason growth can, initially, damage your reputation. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may not celebrate your boundaries. People who were comfortable with your silence may not enjoy your voice. People who could always depend on you may call you selfish when you finally rest. If your goal is to preserve the old reputation, you may remain trapped in the old behavior. Buddhist practice encourages awareness of attachment not only to pleasant things, but also to identity. I am the helpful one. I am the calm one. I am the strong one. I am the person everyone can rely on. Even positive identities can become restrictive. What happens when you need rest? What happens when you are angry? What happens when you cannot help? What happens when you say no? If your identity cannot include these moments, then the identity is too narrow. You are not one role. You are a changing human being. This is connected to the Buddhist teaching that the self is not a fixed object. We often behave as though there is one permanent version of me that must be protected. But you are constantly changing. Your beliefs change, your needs change, your understanding changes. The person you were at 20 may not be the person you are at 50. The person others remember may no longer exist in the same form. Trying to keep everyone updated with the correct version of you is impossible. Some people will always remember an older version. Someone may still judge you for a mistake you made 10 years ago. You may have changed completely. You may have apologized. You may have learned. But they still see the old you. This can be painful. The controlling mind says, "I need to make them understand that I am different now." Maybe you can show that over time, but you cannot demand that their memory changes on your schedule. Your growth remains real, even if someone refuses to recognize it. That is important. Transformation does not require unanimous approval. If you need everyone to confirm that you have changed, your change is still partly dependent on them. Sometimes you must continue living differently and let time speak. And sometimes they may never change their opinion. You still continue. This is inner freedom. There is another prison built from reputation: fear of hypocrisy. People sometimes believe that once they have publicly taken a position, they can never change it. They said one thing years ago. Now they have learned more, but changing their mind feels embarrassing. What will people say? They will call me inconsistent, so they continue defending an idea they no longer fully believe. This is another form of attachment to image, but learning requires the freedom to change. If new understanding cannot change your opinion because you are protecting your reputation, reputation is now standing in the way of wisdom. A mature person can say, "I used to believe this. I see it differently now." That is not weakness. It is evidence that the mind is alive. Buddhist practice values direct seeing more than pride. If something you believed turns out to be wrong, holding it more tightly does not make you wiser. Release it. Let someone laugh if they want. Better to lose an argument than lose your ability to learn. This also applies to apologies. People sometimes avoid apologizing because they fear what an apology will do to their reputation. If I admit I was wrong, they will think I am weak. So they protect the image and damage the relationship. A sincere apology can feel threatening to the ego because it gives up control of being seen as right. But there is strength in saying, "I was wrong." You do not become smaller, you become more honest. The same is true when you do not know something. You can spend enormous energy pretending to understand because you fear looking foolish. Or you can simply say, "I don't know." That small sentence can free you from performance. The need to appear knowledgeable is exhausting. You must always have an answer, always have an opinion, always know what to say. But wisdom includes recognizing the limits of your knowledge. The person who can admit ignorance is often easier to teach than the person protecting an image of intelligence. Reputation can also become a prison through social comparison. You see what other people are doing, their homes, their careers, their children, their travel, their achievements. Then you begin wondering what your own life looks like beside theirs. Now you do not simply want something because you need it. You want it because of what it communicates. A larger house communicates success. A particular job title communicates status. A certain lifestyle communicates importance. This can push people into debt, exhaustion, or decisions that do not match their real values. The object itself may not be the true. Desire. The reputation attached to the object is. Ask yourself, if nobody could ever see this, would I still want it? That question can reveal a lot. Would you still buy it? Would you still pursue the position? Would you still post about it? Would you still attend? Would you still make the same choice? Sometimes the answer is yes. Good, then the desire may be genuinely yours. Sometimes the answer is no. Then perhaps you are buying an image rather than a life. Buddhist simplicity can be very freeing here. You begin asking what is enough, not what looks impressive. What actually supports well-being? What truly matters? What kind of life allows the mind to become calmer, kinder, clearer? These questions cut through performance. A simple life that fits you can create more peace than an impressive life maintained for an audience. There is also a strange loneliness that can come from reputation control. The more perfect the image, the harder it becomes to know whether people love you or the image. If you never show uncertainty, do your friends really know you? If you always act happy, who knows when you need support? If you never admit fear, who has the chance to sit beside you in it? Vulnerability has risks. Not everyone deserves access to your private world. But some honest vulnerability is necessary for deep connection. Otherwise, you may be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. They know the version you present, not the person who exists underneath. This is why freedom from reputation does not mean telling everybody everything. It means becoming less afraid of being real where trust exists. You do not need to perform strength for the people who love you. You can say, "I am struggling." You can say, "I need help." You can say, "I am confused." You can say, "I changed my mind." These words make you human, not weak. The people capable of healthy connection will usually make room for that humanity. And if someone loses respect because you showed normal human vulnerability, that may tell you something important about the relationship. Another way to loosen reputation attachment is to notice how temporary reputation actually is. Think about the people who seemed enormously important in one stage of your life. Teachers, colleagues, neighbors, people whose opinions once kept you awake. Where are many of them now? Some disappeared, some moved, some relationships ended. Some people probably no longer remember the thing you were so embarrassed about. Yet at the time, their opinion felt enormous. This is worth remembering when shame appears. The mind often exaggerates how much other people are thinking about you. Most people are thinking about themselves, their problems, their bills, their health, their relationships, their own mistakes. You may spend 2 days worrying about a comment you made while everyone else has already moved on. This does not mean nobody notices you. It means you may be giving other people's attention more permanence than it actually has. A mistake feels like the whole room will remember forever. Usually, life keeps moving. You should too. Buddhist teachings about impermanence apply to embarrassment as much as anything else. That moment changes. The conversation ends. People forget. You learn. Another day arrives. But if you keep replaying the embarrassment, you become the person preserving it. You turn a temporary event into a long sentence. This is another reason self-compassion matters. Sometimes the person most determined to protect your reputation is you because you are afraid of your own judgment. You think, "I cannot be the kind of person who makes this mistake." Why not? You are human. Maybe you acted badly. Then take responsibility. Make amends if possible. Learn. But refusing to accept that you made a mistake does not improve your character. It only makes the ego more defensive. True dignity is not never making mistakes. It is being able to face them without hiding. This creates a reputation that is much less fragile because it does not depend on perfection. Ironically, the more you stop trying to control your reputation, the more trustworthy you may become. People sense when someone is not constantly performing. They see consistency. They see honesty. They see a person capable of admitting errors. But this should not become another strategy for reputation. The point is not, if I stop caring, people will admire me more. That would simply turn freedom into another performance. The point is that you live according to values, whether admiration comes or not. This is the deeper Buddhist direction. Your question changes from, "How am I being seen?" to, "What kind of mind am I cultivating? Am I becoming more truthful, more compassionate, more patient, more aware, more responsible?" These are inner questions. They do not require an audience. You could receive no praise at all and still know whether you are moving in the right direction. This is far more stable than reputation. Reputation belongs partly to other people. Character belongs much more closely to your own practice. One can be misunderstood. The other is lived. There will still be moments when criticism hurts. Freedom from reputation does not mean you become emotionless. If someone falsely accuses you, you may feel angry. If people misunderstand your motives, you may feel sad. If a group rejects you, the pain can be real. The practice is not eliminating that pain. It is refusing to turn the pain into endless self-abandonment. You do not change everything about yourself just to win everyone back. You pause, you examine. If correction is needed, correct. If apology is needed, apologize. If clarification is useful, clarify. Then let the rest go. This is important because there is no amount of good behavior that can guarantee universal approval. Even kind people are disliked. Even wise people are criticized. Even generous people are misunderstood. If you wait for a life where everyone sees you correctly, you are waiting for something that human society cannot provide. People will project. People will misunderstand. People will judge from incomplete information. People will believe rumors. People will have preferences. Some may dislike you simply because you remind them of something in themselves. You cannot prevent all of this. What you can prevent is turning every opinion into an order. Someone thinks you are too quiet. You do not have to become loud. Someone thinks you are too ambitious. You do not have to shrink. Someone thinks your boundary is selfish. You do not have to remove it automatically. Someone thinks your life should look different. They are allowed to think that. You are allowed to continue. There is great freedom in this phrase. They are allowed to think that. You do not have to agree. You do not have to prove them wrong. You do not have to punish them. Their thought can exist without becoming your task. This is how the prison door begins to open. You stop running from room to room inside other people's minds trying to rearrange the furniture. You come back to your own mind. You ask whether your conscience is clear. You ask whether your actions were wise. You ask what you can improve. Then you keep living. This can make decisions much simpler. Instead of asking 10 people whether they approve, you gather the information you genuinely need. You reflect. You consider consequences. Then you choose. Some people will like the choice, some will not. That is part of freedom. Freedom is not a life without consequences. It is a life where fear of opinion no longer makes every important decision for you. And perhaps one of the clearest signs that reputation has loosened its grip is that you become willing to be ordinary. You do not need to look extraordinary every day. You can have an average day. You can wear something simple. You can not know the answer. You can stay home. You can change direction. You can be a beginner. You can fail at something publicly. You can laugh at yourself. This lightness is valuable. The ego wants constant protection. Buddhist awareness sees that there is less to protect than we thought. You are changing. People's opinions are changing. The image is changing. Why exhaust yourself trying to freeze it? Live well. That is enough work. Let your actions speak over time. Let some people misunderstand. Let some opinions pass without reply. Let your life become larger than the stories being told about you. You may eventually discover that the reputation you spent years protecting was never something you truly possessed. It lived in other people's minds. You could influence it, but you could never completely own it. What you do possess more directly is this moment, this intention, this action, this response. That is where your attention belongs. In the end, trying to control everything does not give you peace. It gives you more things to fear losing. You try to control people, outcomes, the future, your reputation, even the answers to questions life may never explain. But the tighter the grip becomes, the heavier the mind feels. Buddhist teachings remind us that peace begins when we stop demanding that life obey us. People will change. Plans will fail. Some questions will remain unanswered. Some people will misunderstand you. And still, you can be okay. You do not need to control every outcome to live wisely. You only need to know what belongs to you, your actions, your intentions, your response, and the way you meet this moment. Let the rest move as it must. The more you release what was never fully yours to control, the more space you create for calm, clarity, and freedom. If one thing in your life is exhausting you because you are trying too hard to control it, write in the comments, "I choose to let go." Let that be your small promise to yourself today. And if these Buddhist teachings help you find more peace in a changing world, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next lesson.